You know that feeling right in the pit of your stomach when you're about to ask someone out on a date?
Oh, yeah,
Like, not
yeah.
just a casual text, but actually standing face to face, looking them right in the eye. That exact moment before the words actually leave your mouth.
Right. It's terrifying.
It really is. It's like your peripheral vision starts to tunnel and the ambient noise in the room just sort of fades out.
The physical symptoms are completely unmistakable. You get that sudden dryness in the throat.
Mm-hmm.
The heart rate spikes, your palms get clammy. I mean, your brain just goes into absolute overdrive, scrambling for a reason, literally any plausible excuse to just walk away, pretend the moment never happened, and keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, it's this primal stomach-dropping dread. And I think we usually quarantine that specific flavor of terror to romance,
Mhm.
like to our personal lives and our deepest insecurities.
We do, yeah.
But if we pull back the curtain on how human beings actually operate, that exact same biological panic, that highly localized fight or flight response, is the primary reason people aren't getting what they want in their careers,
Mhm.
or in their businesses, or just in life in general.
That's the thing. We tend to default to these structural excuses when we hit a wall professionally. We build these elaborate narratives for ourselves.
Like what kind of narrative?
No, we tell ourselves we're failing because our product is slightly overpriced, or we lack some innate charismatic business talent, or, the macroeconomic conditions are just too tough right now.
Right, it's the economy's fault.
Exactly. I mean, it is so much easier to blame the market than to actually look at our own biology.
Which is wild when you think about it. What if the root cause has literally nothing to do with the market? What if the reality is simply that we are biologically and psychologically terrified of the vulnerability required to actually ask for what we want?
And it shows up everywhere.
It really does. Like pitching a new idea to a skeptical boss, or asking a client to sign a massive contract, or even just, asking a peer for help. It triggers that identical, uncomfortable truth about human nature.
Which is that we are universally biologically terrified of hearing the word no.
Yes, and that avoidance dictates the vast majority of our professional behavior.
And the really terrifying part is that it happens almost entirely beneath our conscious awareness.
We don't even realize we're doing it.
Right. We disguise our fear of asking as being strategic or waiting for the right time.
Oh, I'm just waiting for Q3, right.
Exactly.
So for this deep dive, we're getting into the origin story and the critical first chapter of Jeb Blount's work on objections.
It's such a fascinating starting point.
It really is. The mission here today is to understand why the simple, conscious discipline of asking is the master key to business success, and how our brains actively, aggressively sabotage our ability to do it.
Along with why mastering this discipline is the only legitimate, non-manipulative way to navigate a world that is just full of no's.
Absolutely. And honestly, the existence of this specific body of work is a fascinating study in how we misidentify our own problems.
It really is. I mean, the author originally had zero intention of writing a book on objections. None at all.
Wait, really? What was he going to write about?
He was deep into outlining this massive, comprehensive book on sales-specific negotiation tactics. That was the grand plan.
The negotiation. Okay.
Yeah, but a single speaking engagement entirely derailed it. He was invited to speak to the inside sales team for the New York Mets at Citi Field.
Oh, wow. The Mets. You really have to put yourself in that environment for a second. An inside sales floor for a professional sports franchise is not a quiet, contemplative corporate boardroom.
Not at all. It is a high-octane, high-volume environment.
It's loud. You have this massive room filled with young, sharp, highly competitive sales professionals. And the author walks into the auditorium for what he calls a Jeb Unplugged session.
Right, which means no safety net.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is no script. There are no polished PowerPoint slides. It is just 3 hours of these reps hurling their absolute toughest, most persistent daily challenges right at him.
And during that grueling, unscripted 3-hour gauntlet, this undeniable pattern emerged.
What was it?
Almost every single question these reps asked, like the things keeping them up at night, the hurdles they were genuinely bleeding over, had absolutely nothing to do with negotiation.
Let me guess.
Yeah.
It was all about dealing with objections.
Entirely. They wanted to know what to say, how to physically and emotionally respond when a prospect abruptly shuts the door in their face.
Which exposes a massive blind spot in the broader landscape of business literature, if you think about
It
it.
really does.
Because if you browse the shelves for books on influence, communication, or entrepreneurship, The concept of the objection is treated like this dirty little secret.
It's always a footnote.
Always. It's the tucked away chapter at the very back of the book, usually titled something super generic like Overcoming Hurdles.
Well, humans possess a profound negativity bias, but we paradoxically crave positive visualization.
Meaning we only want to picture the win.
Exactly. We want to read about the grand, sweeping pitch. We want to study the perfect presentation structure, the glorious closing moment where everyone shakes hands, signs the paperwork, and smiles.
Right. We're chasing the dopamine hit of the theoretical win.
Precisely. And consequently, we systematically ignore the uncomfortable, gritty friction of rejection because merely thinking about it induces anxiety.
We just marginalize the exact part of the process that causes us emotional pain.
Yes.
But let me push on this a bit, because I understand the psychology of avoidance, sure. But why does it take a room full of professional baseball ticket sellers to make an industry expert, someone who has literally dedicated his life to studying sales and influence, realize this is the most obvious pain point in business?
That's a great question.
I mean, shouldn't the primacy of the objection have been apparent to everyone from day one?
You would think so, but consider the structural nature of most corporate environments. A standard business-to-business professional often operates within a long, complex sales cycle.
Okay.
In those environments, objections rarely look like a hard no.
Oh, they're polite.
Right. They're disguised. They're disguised as delays, or we need to undergo a budget review, or the classic, let's circle back in Q3.
So it doesn't even register as a rejection.
Exactly. The corporate professional can intellectualize the rejection. They can convince themselves the deal is still alive.
But selling tickets for a baseball team via inside sales, that strips away all of that camouflage.
Oh, completely. It involves a massive volume of direct cold calls. These reps are getting hit with raw, unfiltered, visceral no's dozens of times a day.
It's just immediate.
Their pain is acute. It is immediate. There is no intellectualizing a dial tone.
Wow, yeah. They're operating in the absolute trenches of human resistance. They're experiencing the math of rejection at a speed that forces the issue right to the surface.
And that's the epiphany. The theoretical elegance of a negotiation tactic is entirely useless if the person on the other end of the phone hangs up on you in the first 10 seconds.
Because negotiation implies you already have a willing participant.
Exactly. Objections prevent the participation from ever happening in the first place.
That makes so much sense.
So when the author left Citi Field, the reality of this gap hit him hard. He woke up at 5 a.m. the next morning, vibrating with adrenaline, just waiting for the clock to strike 8.0 so he could call his publisher.
We couldn't wait.
He described himself as sounding manic, practically begging the publisher to shelve the negotiation book because he realized he was writing the wrong book.
He had to write a manual on objections instead.
He had to.
Look at the underlying principle there, though. The recurring, uncomfortable questions people ask in your industry, the things people actively avoid discussing because they are messy or embarrassing, that is where the real value resides.
Yes, the friction points everyone else is trying to smooth over with theory are where you are needed most.
Because solving the problem everyone else is too afraid to look at makes you indispensable.
Truly. If you can navigate the emotional minefield of rejection, you possess a skill that AI cannot replicate and competitors cannot easily copy.
So let's shift from the theory of why objections matter to a granular look at how someone actually powers through a mountain of them.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
The text outlines a real-world masterclass in persistence and poise through the story of a software-as-a-service rep named Richard.
The Legend of Richard. It's a case study that deserves serious dissection.
So Richard had a highly specific target, and that target was the author himself.
Jeb Blount.
Right. Now, selling a sales enablement tool to an internationally recognized expert in sales and objections is arguably one of the highest difficulty maneuvers in business.
It's like trying to do a magic trick for a master magician.
Exactly. The target knows all the tricks. He literally wrote the book on the tricks. But Richard mounted a campaign that defies conventional logic.
Over the course of 5 months, Richard left 71 voicemails.
71.
Yes, and he sent 18 customized emails. He systematically tracked the author on LinkedIn, he mapped out the organization, and connected with key internal stakeholders.
We really need to pause and analyze the emotional fortitude required to execute that sequence. Because imagine picking up the phone to make the 70th call, possessing the very clear data that the previous 69 attempts resulted in absolute silence.
It goes against everything our brains are wired to do. The human brain is a prediction machine. By call 15, the brain is predicting failure and begging you to stop expending energy on a dead end.
Richard was fighting his own biology every single time he dialed that number.
Every single time.
And he wasn't just throwing spaghetti at the wall either. He was building ambient awareness.
Hmm?
He actually managed to get the author on the phone a few brief times earlier in the cycle, but got aggressively brushed off.
But he didn't disappear.
No, he didn't. Finally, in May, 5 full months after the initial attempt, Richard caught him at the perfect time. The author answered his phone.
And he instantly recognized Richard's voice.
Right, because the persistence had been so sustained, so professional, that the author felt a subconscious psychological obligation to at least give the guy 5 minutes.
That persistence built equity. It forced a level of respect. But, securing the demonstration is merely getting a ticket to the game. It is not closing the deal.
No, absolutely not. So Richard runs the demo. It goes flawlessly. The software directly addresses a real training delivery bottleneck the author is experiencing.
And the author openly admits he likes the product.
Right. So Richard, maintaining his momentum, confidently asks for the commitment. He asks for the credit card, and the author almost instinctively throws up a classic, heavily fortified, multi-layered objection.
The quintessential business brick wall. It is designed to be totally impenetrable.
The author says, "Richard, I like it, but I need to discuss it with my broader team. My schedule right now is absolutely packed, and getting everyone up to speed on a new platform is going to be a massive distraction."
And he didn't stop there.
No, he added. Plus, I don't want to buy yet another shiny software program that everyone gets excited about for a week, but never actually uses.
He deployed 3 distinct, formidable objections in one single breath.
It's brilliant. The stakeholder delay, the time and energy constraint, and the fear of a wasted financial investment.
And the turnaround framework Richard uses in the next 30 seconds is a masterclass in emotional regulation and linguistic precision.
Because the natural amateur instinct when someone objects to a product you believe in is to mount a defense.
Right. It is to counterattack. You want to say, no, it's incredibly intuitive, or
Right.
it won't take that much time to learn.
Which instantly validates the buyer's adversarial stance. You are now in a tug-of-war. If you pull back, they dig their heels in deeper.
You just trigger their fight-or-flight response. Instead of arguing, Richard's first move was to relate.
How did he do that?
He said, "Jeb, it sounds like you've been burned in the past with SaaS subscriptions that go unused. I get it. It feels like you're pouring money down the drain." He didn't just acknowledge the objection. He validated the author's emotional reality. He used a linguistic mirror to show that he completely understood the pain of wasted capital.
He disarmed the tension by stepping over to the author's side of the table. He practically gave the objection a verbal hug.
Exactly. And once the emotional temperature dropped, Richard moved to the second phase, which is to clarify.
Clarify. Why is that important?
Because he needed to ensure they were operating on the exact same page and that there were no hidden traps. So he isolated the specific issues.
Oh, I see.
He said, "It seems like your top concerns are the operational distraction of training your team and the financial risk of a wasted investment if adoption is low." Did I capture that accurately?
And crucially, he asked if there was anything else standing in the way.
Yes. Fencing in the objection.
He is building a perimeter. He's forcing the buyer to confirm that these are the only hurdles. He prevents the author from magically producing a fourth objection about budget or integration later on.
And with the boundaries clearly drawn and agreed upon, Richard executed the final phase. Minimize.
Okay, what does minimize mean in this context?
He offered a completely risk-free solution that systematically dismantled the stated concerns. He offered to absorb the entire cognitive load of the implementation himself.
Oh, so he took the work off the author's plate.
Exactly. He said, "I will schedule the onboarding calls with your team. I will monitor their weekly usage. I will report the metrics directly back to you. It takes 0 minutes from your schedule."
That's incredible.
And then for the financial risk, he said, "And because we don't require a long-term annual commitment, if the team isn't utilizing it after a few months, we simply part ways."
And less than an hour after that exchange, Richard was processing the corporate American Express card.
It's amazing.
But let's pause and apply a heavy dose of reality to this narrative, because anyone listening right now is likely thinking the exact same thing I am.
The 71 voicemails.
Yes, 71 voicemails over 5 months. At what specific point does relentless persistence legally and socially cross the line into harassment?
It's a very fine line.
Because if someone leaves me 71 voicemails, my instinct isn't to respect their hustle. My instinct is to block their number and potentially call security.
The distinction between persistence and harassment is not defined by the sheer volume of touches. It is defined by the perceived value of the outreach and the profound professionalism of the execution.
So it's about what you say, not just how often you say it.
Exactly. If Richard had left 71 identical voicemails saying, "Hey Jeb, touching base again, call me back, I really want to sell you this software," that is textbook harassment.
Right, because it's entirely self-serving. It demands the prospect's time without offering anything in return.
It's just a digital mosquito buzzing in your ear.
But how do you measure that value from the prospect's point of view when they are actively ignoring you? They clearly don't perceive the value yet.
You measure it by the content and the cadence. Richard wasn't just calling to say hi. He was utilizing a multi-channel approach. Voicemail, email, social media.
And what was he actually saying in those messages?
His messages likely included industry insights, specific observations about the author's business model, or even short, non-demanding micro-videos demonstrating a hyper-specific solution.
He was leaving breadcrumbs of competence.
That's a great way to put it. He demonstrated a deep, unwavering belief that his solution belonged in the author's ecosystem. He wasn't demanding time, he was consistently, politely offering an opportunity.
Furthermore, the cadence matters, like you said.
Yes. 71 calls in 3 weeks is a stalker. 71 touches spread over 5 months is a persistent professional who refuses to let you fall through the cracks.
That pacing changes everything.
And the ultimate proof of his professionalism was how he handled the friction when he finally got it. He didn't use high-pressure tactics or guilt trips. He used empathy, structural clarity, and problem-solving.
So persistence creates the initial crack in the door. It forces the opportunity to exist.
Right.
But gracefully handling the resulting objection, validating the other person's reality, and structurally minimizing their risk is the mechanics of actually walking through the door and closing the deal.
Richard didn't win a battle of attrition. He won by removing the cognitive and financial risk.
He won because, fundamentally, he had the discipline to repeatedly ask for the opportunity and then ask for the business. But Richard is the outlier here. He's a statistical anomaly.
Oh, for sure. The vast majority of professionals freeze up long before voicemail number 10, let alone the final closing question.
Which brings us to the brutal underlying truth of business. You aren't getting what you want because you simply aren't asking for it.
It really is that simple and that difficult.
Asking is the literal, mechanical key that unlocks every subsequent phase of progress. It unlocks proprietary information, it secures meetings, it generates micro-commitments, and it finalizes agreements.
Failing to ask guarantees failure. The outcome is binary. But understanding why it is so difficult requires looking at the psychological framework of vulnerability.
And the text references Dr. Brené Brown's definition of vulnerability here, which totally recontextualizes the entire concept of asking.
It does. She defines vulnerability as the state created in the presence of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure.
Right. When you formulate a direct, confident ask, you are stripping away all of your plausible deniability. You are completely uncomfortably exposed.
You are explicitly stating, "I want this outcome," and handing the other person the power to deny you.
And the human brain is exquisitely tuned to anticipate and avoid social rejection.
It hates it. Leading up to the moment of the ask, your mind runs highly complex simulations of the rejection before a single word is even spoken.
Your internal alarm system, specifically the amygdala, screams at you to abort the mission.
Because it views that emotional exposure not just as an awkward moment, but as a literal evolutionary threat to your survival and social standing within the tribe.
Think about the physical sensation of standing on the edge of a high diving board when you're a kid. You climb the ladder, your toes grip the edge of the board, and you look down.
And the water seems impossibly far away.
Right. And the longer you stand on that precipice, wishing and hoping that you will magically end up in the pool without having to experience the terrifying sensation of falling, the more paralyzed you become.
Your legs start to shake.
Your brain begins playing out catastrophic, worst-case scenarios. You can't logic your way to the water. To get to the water, you simply have to jump.
You have to consciously override the neurological fear response.
Exactly.
And that diving board analogy perfectly illustrates the trap of passive behavior in a business conversation.
How so?
When we are terrified of jumping, when we are terrified of making the assumptive ask, we employ passive language as a defense mechanism. We beat around the bush.
We use weak, heavily caveated phrasing.
Yes. We say things like, "I was just wondering if maybe at some point you might have some time," or do you think we could possibly consider exploring?
We are standing on the board, waiting for the prospect to reach up and pull us into the water.
Exactly. We are desperately hoping they will do our job for us and say, you know what? I love this. Stop talking and let's sign the paperwork.
But they don't.
They never do. The tragic irony is that this insecurity doesn't just fail to get the yes. It actively invites the other person to brush us off.
Because when you exude desperation, hesitation, or weakness, the other person registers it immediately.
It makes them deeply uncomfortable. You haven't provided a firm, confident structure for them to lean on, so you essentially give them psychological permission to say no.
So you have to ditch the wishbone and grow a backbone. The hesitation you feel as you open your mouth to ask is not an indicator that you lack business acumen or that your product is flawed or that you are inherently weak.
No, it is a primal biological fear response that every human being experiences.
The difference between a high performer and an amateur is that the high performer recognizes the fear, acknowledges it, and consciously jumps anyway.
And the connection between our internal fear and the external outcome is where the science gets incredibly granular here.
Yeah, let's get into that. Why does our internal hesitation have such a profound immediate impact on the buyer's behavior? Like, why does being scared actually cause the other person to reject us?
To understand that, we have to look at the mechanics of emotional contagion and the 10-to-1 rule.
Okay, what is emotional contagion?
The work of Shirley Wang on emotional contagion is terrifyingly accurate. Human beings are incredibly adept at subconsciously picking up on and physically mirroring the emotions of the people around them.
Is an evolutionary survival mechanism, right?
Yeah.
Driven heavily by mirror neurons in the brain.
Exactly. If you are part of a hunter-gatherer tribe and one person suddenly exhibits extreme terror, it behooves everyone else to immediately adopt that state of fear and scan for the predator.
You don't have time to ask them why they are scared.
No, you just catch their fear like a virus. It ensures the survival of the group.
Okay, so apply that evolutionary virus to the paradox of passivity in a modern business setting. You're sitting across the table from a client. You act overly passive because you are terrified of being perceived as pushy or aggressive.
You think you are being polite and deferential.
But what is mechanically happening in the room? Your insecurity, your micro-expressions of anxiety, your subtle vocal tremors, they transfer directly to the buyer's nervous system.
You literally infect them with your fear.
You manufacture resistance where absolutely none existed. The buyer might have walked into that room perfectly happy and ready to proceed.
But as you speak, they suddenly feel anxious, their chest tightens, they feel unsure and hesitant.
And they usually don't possess the self-awareness to know why they feel that way.
Exactly. They don't say, I am mirroring your anxiety. They just look at you and say, you know, something doesn't feel right. We are going to hold off for now.
Wow. But ultra-high performers operate on the exact opposite frequency, don't they?
They do. They exude a quiet, grounded confidence. They carry an implicit assumption that they are supposed to win the deal because their solution is genuinely the best option.
And that quiet confidence transfers to the buyer just as easily as fear does. It makes the buyer feel secure, anchored, and safe in making a positive decision.
The text utilizes an analogy about horses that perfectly isolates this dynamic.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Consider the physics of horseback riding. A horse has a massive size and power advantage over a human, roughly a 10-to-1 weight ratio.
Right.
Yet humans routinely ride them. Horses are heavily prey-oriented animals, meaning their survival depends on hyper-awareness of their environment and the emotional state of their herd leaders.
They possess an innate, instant ability to sense hesitation or fear in a rider.
Yes. The moment you get into the saddle, if your heart rate is elevated, if your grip is tense, the horse knows immediately.
The horse realizes, the creature on my back is terrified. Therefore, the environment must be dangerous, and this creature is not capable of leading us to safety.
Exactly. If the horse doesn't feel your confidence as a stabilizing force, it will take over. It will refuse commands, it will spook, or it will literally buck you off.
And buyers, despite all their corporate sophistication, operate on that exact same primal instinct.
They absolutely do. If they sense that you do not fundamentally believe in what you are asking for, if they sense your internal panic, they will instinctively push back.
They will buck you off the deal.
They require your conviction to feel safe navigating the uncertainty of a new purchase or a new initiative.
So let me throw a wrench into this, because this specific advice can easily feel like a psychological trap.
How so?
Well, if I am genuinely terrified, let's say I am a brand new representative pitching to a Fortune 500 CEO, or I am an entrepreneur pitching my life's work to a venture capitalist and my palms are literally sweating. Is it possible to artificially manufacture emotional contagion.
Ah, the fake it till you make it approach.
Right. Can I just puff out my chest and
Hmm.
project fake confidence? Or can the human brain smell inauthentic confidence just as easily as fear?
It is a critical distinction, and the short answer is no, you cannot easily fake it.
Really? Why not?
Because faked, arrogant confidence is neurologically processed as manipulation or sleaze. When you try to adopt a persona of bravado that isn't rooted in reality, your micro-expressions and body language usually fall out of sync with your words.
Like your face is saying one thing, but your body is saying another.
Exactly. And the buyer's brain registers that incongruence as a massive red flag, triggering a whole different set of negative defensive reactions.
It just feels slimy. It feels like you were dealing with a con artist.
True emotional contagion is not about acting like a sociopath. It is about deep mental framing.
What does that mean practically?
It is the practice of what the author calls assuming the yes. This happens long before you enter the room. You have to mentally walk yourself through the rigorous logic of why this specific buyer should logically say yes.
So you have to deeply, genuinely anchor yourself in the value and reality of your solution.
Yes, you are not faking confidence. You are regulating your emotions by focusing entirely on the truth of how you can help them. When you are anchored in that reality, your resulting calmness acts as the stabilizing force.
So your internal mental state dictates your external physical results. You have to aggressively manage your own mind before you can ever hope to guide the buyer's mind.
The discipline of the assumptive ask is fundamentally an internal exercise in emotional regulation. The verbal output is just the final, visible step of that regulation.
Now, if asking is this deeply fraught with biological landmines, if it requires this intense level of emotional regulation, and if it forces us to face down our deepest evolutionary fears of rejection,
Right.
it is only natural to look for an escape hatch.
Yeah.
I mean, surely there's a magic trick. There must be some secret script, some precise combination of words we can memorize to just bypass all this psychological heavy lifting and guarantee a yes.
The search for the cheat code is universal, and it brings us directly to the myth of the silver bullet objection slayer.
We really have to confront the elephant in the room here. Everyone desperately wants a shortcut.
Of course we do.
We want a magic set of words that guarantees compliance without forcing us to endure the terrifying risk of vulnerability and rejection.
And because human beings possess such a desperate psychological need for that cheat code, an entire, highly lucrative industry of pseudo-experts and charlatans has sprung up to monetize our fear.
Oh, you see it everywhere online.
They sell these $99 foolproof scripts and secret ninja formulas, promising to overcome any objection a buyer could possibly throw at you.
It's just wild.
It is crucial to firmly debunk this fantasy right here, right now. Modern buyers are far too sophisticated and far too exposed to marketing to fall for sleazy, manipulative, 1980s-style sales tricks.
The moment you attempt to deploy a rote, canned script on a highly intelligent modern buyer, you can physically see their defensive walls snap into place.
They recognize the cadence of the script. They know they are being handled.
Using a canned script on a smart buyer is like trying to use a Jedi mind trick when you clearly aren't a Jedi. It doesn't control their mind, it just makes you look foolish and wildly out of touch.
The analogy used in the text to describe this is absolutely brilliant.
The golf one.
Yes. It compares professionals hunting for a magic objection slayer script to an amateur golfer who constantly buys new, incredibly expensive putters.
Convinced that the space-age technology in the club will magically fix their terrible swing.
Exactly. The $500 putter is not the problem. The fundamental mechanical flaws in the golfer's swing are the problem.
And in the business arena, the lack of a clever script is not the reason you are failing.
No, your fundamental fear of asking and your inability to emotionally regulate yourself in the face of natural human resistance is the problem.
The logic is sound, but it raises a fascinating behavioral question for me.
What's that?
If there is definitively no silver bullet, why does the market for these magic tricks continue to thrive? Why do highly educated professionals continue to buy the $500 putters and the $99 scripts?
Because the alternative requires hard work, self-reflection, and enduring emotional pain.
It's just easier.
We purchase the magic scripts because we want the illusion of control. We want to believe that if we just possess the correct esoteric knowledge, the right combination of syllables, we can insulate ourselves from the sting of rejection.
It's a sophisticated defense mechanism against our own biology.
It is much easier to buy a script than to admit you are terrified of another human being telling you no.
Which leads to what might be the harshest, yet simultaneously the most liberating practical takeaway of this entire deep dive.
And you have to fully accept this absolute truth.
The only guaranteed, foolproof way to eliminate rejection from your life is to never ask for anything ever again. That is the only silver bullet.
If you want a life completely free of rejection, you must live a life completely free of asking, which means a life free of advancement, growth, or meaningful success.
You just have to stop looking for a silver bullet. Stop searching for a secret path around the friction and start building the emotional resilience required to walk straight through it.
So synthesizing the core of this first chapter, the argument being made is that getting past no is not a tactical or linguistic problem.
It's not about memorizing manipulative comebacks or finding the perfect retort.
No, it is at its absolute core a test of emotional regulation.
The real barrier standing between you and your ultimate goal is not the objection sitting across the table.
The barrier is your own biological fear of triggering that objection. By combining the conscious daily discipline of the assumptive ask with a deep scientific understanding of emotional contagion, you entirely change the game.
You transform the process of asking from a terrifying, emotionally fraught gamble into a predictable, confident discipline.
You stop operating as a victim of your own amygdala and start acting as an active, regulated participant in your own success.
We have unpacked the underlying reasons why you have to ask, the mechanics of how Richard navigated the gauntlet perfectly, and the intense emotional and biological hurdles that try to paralyze you every single time you open your mouth to state what you want.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but what actually happens inside the architecture of your brain in that split second when someone looks you in the eye and flat out says no? The next time you face a rejection, the next time you feel that localized stomach-dropping dread and the urge to run, I want you to consider this. Why does a simple two-letter word trigger a biological response in your anterior cingulate cortex that is neurologically identical to the sensation of physical pain?
Why is it that the exact moment we need to be the most confident, like the precise, critical moment we actually have to open our mouths and ask for what we want, is the exact moment our brains decide to hit the emergency panic button?
Bro, it's the worst feeling in the world.
Right. I mean, I want you to really think about that feeling for a second. You know the one.
Oh, yeah.
You've done all the grueling prep work, right? You've researched the prospect until your eyes bled.
You've tailored the presentation perfectly.
Exactly. You've navigated weeks, maybe months of just endless back and forth emails.
The endless email chains, yeah.
And you are finally sitting there at the finish line. You make the pitch, it lands beautifully, the client is nodding, and then, well, it's time.
The moment of truth.
Right. You open your mouth to actually ask for the deal, and suddenly your throat tightens up.
Your voice goes up half an octave.
Yes. You start using these weak, passive, just wishy-washy words that completely deflate the entire room.
And you can actually feel it happening.
Yeah. Oh, you can feel the deal slipping through your fingers in real time. And it is entirely because of how you asked.
It is a universally agonizing experience.
Right.
And what's fascinating here is that it doesn't matter how seasoned you are.
Really? Even the pros?
Oh, absolutely. You could be a 20-year veteran in enterprise sales or a founder pitching for a Series B, and that biological trap is still waiting for you.
That's terrifying.
It is. You built up all this incredible momentum, all this undeniable value, and then right at the absolute apex of the conversation, the exact moment you were supposed to plant a flag, you just retreat.
You soften your voice?
Exactly. You essentially hand all the power over to the other person. You practically invite them to tell you no.
It's self-sabotage at its absolute finest.
It really is. And the craziest part is you usually don't even realize you're doing it until you're like walking to your car afterward.
Oh, man, playing the tape back in your head and just cringing.
The post-pitch car ride of shame.
We have all been there. And, you know, that shared painful experience is exactly why we're dedicating this deep dive to dismantling that specific moment.
They had to break it down.
Right. We are getting into the mechanics of the ask, drawing from Chapter 2 of Jeb Blount's framework in his book, Objections.
Such a crucial chapter.
It really is. We're going to break down the 3 foundational keys to making a successful request.
Because it applies to everything, right?
Exactly. Whether you are trying to close a massive corporate software deal or trying to get funding for a startup, or honestly just trying to get a new project budget approved by a really stubborn boss.
Yeah, the everyday asks.
Mastering the discipline of the ask is the ultimate shortcut to getting past no. If you don't ask correctly, everything else you've done up to that point is just expensive noise.
That is the absolute crux of it. The discipline of asking is the engine that drives literally any successful negotiation or sales process forward.
Without it, you just stall out.
You completely stall out. But what we're going to look at today isn't just a set of surface-level sales techniques.
Right. No basic tips here.
Exactly. If you're listening to this, you already know the basics of making a pitch. What we need to unpack is the underlying psychology and the raw biology of why asking is so terrifying to the human brain.
And how you can systematically rewire your approach, right?
Yeah, to dramatically increase your odds of actually hearing a yes.
Okay, let's get right into the first key then, because this one immediately challenges how most of us naturally operate.
It really goes against our instincts.
It does. The premise is that you have to make your request with absolute confidence, and you have to literally act as if it's a foregone conclusion that you are going to get what you want.
The assumptive ask.
The assumptive ask, exactly. And the data behind this is just staggering.
It's wild.
When professionals make confident, assertive asks, they get a yes 50 to 70% of the time.
But, and here's the kicker.
Right. The moment they introduce non-assertive, passive language into the request, that success rate absolutely plummets.
Like a rock.
Down to somewhere between 10 and 30%. That is a catastrophic drop-off based entirely on delivery.
The mechanism behind that drop-off is where it gets really interesting. It actually comes down to a psychological phenomenon called emotional contagion.
Emotional contagion. Okay, break that down for us.
So Shirley Wang's research on contagious behavior maps this out perfectly. As human beings, we are incredibly adept at picking up on the emotions of the people around us.
Even if we don't realize it.
Completely subconsciously. We have mirror neurons firing constantly, automatically mimicking the behaviors, the microexpressions, and the emotional states of whoever we are interacting with.
So it's literally contagious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you were sitting across from a stakeholder and you sound afraid, even if it's just, a slight hesitation in your voice, or breaking eye contact for a split second, you aren't just feeling that fear internally.
You're projecting it.
Worse than that, you're actually transmitting that fear directly into the nervous system of the person you were talking to.
Oh, wow. So you're infecting them with your own insecurity.
Precisely. You are manufacturing resistance where absolutely none existed a moment before.
That is wild.
Think about the profound paradox of this behavior. So often, a person will act passive when they ask for something because they're deeply terrified of coming across as too pushy, right? Or aggressive.
Oh, totally. You don't want to be the sleazy salesperson.
Exactly. They have this internal monologue that says, well, if I'm soft and gentle, if I give them an easy out, they won't get defensive.
That backfires.
Completely backfires. That passive, hesitant behavior triggers the exact opposite response in the buyer's brain.
Because it feels off. It just feels incongruent.
Exactly. It signals to the buyer's subconscious that something is wrong.
Like a red flag.
A huge red flag. Their brain registers, wait, this person's asking me for $100,000, but they sound like they don't even believe they deserve it.
What do they know that I don't?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It instantly breeds mistrust. Your attempt to be polite and non-threatening actually triggers the very objections and the very skepticism you were trying so desperately to avoid.
It's like, here's a way to think about it. It's like if you were on a flight and the turbulence gets really bad, right?
Oh, I hate turbulence.
Same. But imagine the pilot comes on the intercom and says, folks, I'm just kind of hoping we might be able to land the plane soon, if that's okay with everyone.
Oh my gosh, I would lose my mind.
You would instantly panic. You'd be looking for the emergency exit.
Absolutely.
You want the pilot to come on and say firmly, we have been cleared for landing. We are beginning our descent. You want them to carry the authority so you don't have to carry the anxiety.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. You want the person leading the interaction to be grounded and certain.
Right.
Because making a decision, especially a high-stakes business decision, is cognitively taxing for a buyer. It carries risk.
It's heavy.
Very heavy. When you are relaxed, when you are confident and assumptive, you transfer those positive, secure emotions to your stakeholder.
You're calming their nervous system down.
You're essentially telling them, you are in good hands, this is safe.
And that lowers their defenses.
It reduces their natural resistance, it bypasses those defensive mechanisms, and it paves a smooth road to a yes.
Okay, let's unpack this and make it tangible for everyone listening, because If you audit the vocabulary people use when they hit that panic moment, it is always these incredibly harmless sounding
Oh, the
qualifiers.
filler words. They're everywhere.
We all catch ourselves doing it. You type out an email and say, I'm just checking in on the proposal.
Or, I was wondering if maybe you had some time next week.
Yeah, or I just want to reach out to see. They sound so polite, but you're saying they are absolute deal killers.
They are toxic to
Yeah.
your success rate. And the reason is they are entirely non-assumptive.
They show doubt.
They frame the interaction as an intrusion. When you say, I was wondering if maybe you have time, you're handing the buyer an engraved invitation to say, no, actually, I don't. I'm very busy.
You're giving them an out before they even ask for one?
You are giving them permission to dismiss you. Contrast that with an assumptive framework.
Okay, what does that look like?
Instead of saying, I'm just checking in, which honestly sounds like a weak apology for existing,
It really does.
you say, the reason I'm calling is to schedule our next implementation step.
That is so much stronger.
Or instead of, how does that sound? Which just invites them to pick apart your offer, you say, why don't we go ahead and get the first delivery set for next Monday?
Let's run a real-world scenario on this, like a really big one. Imagine you are at the end of a long sales cycle, trying to close a massive software deal.
Okay, high stakes.
The passive version of the ask would be something like, so, how many seats were you thinking of starting with?
Yeah, and that puts all the cognitive load on the buyer to formulate a plan. It's weak.
Right. But the confident, assumptive version is, I recommend getting started with our 20-seat bundle. I'll just need the email addresses of each person on your team to get the accounts provisioned.
Notice the massive shift in energy and positioning there.
It's night and day.
The second phrase assumes the sale is already complete. It positions you as the domain expert, making a prescriptive recommendation.
Not a beggar asking for a favor.
Exactly. You are guiding the prospect seamlessly to the very next logical step.
Okay, I hear that, but I have to push back hard on this.
Let's hear it.
Because if someone pulls an assumptive close on me, like if we are having a conversation and they just assume I'm buying and ask for my team's email addresses, my guard instantly goes up.
That's fair.
It feels like a cheap Jedi mind trick. Doesn't this border on sheer arrogance? Like, how do you assume the sale and take that kind of control without sounding like a completely manipulative, pushy jerk?
That is the absolute most common pushback to this concept, and honestly, it is a completely valid concern.
Nobody wants to feel tricked.
Right. No one wants to be bulldozed, and no one wants to be the bulldozer. But we have to dissect the fundamental difference between arrogance and positive expectation.
Okay, what's the difference?
Arrogance is rooted in ego. It's about dominance. It's a salesperson trying to force their will onto a buyer, completely ignoring the buyer's needs just to get a commission.
And buyers can smell that a mile away.
Oh, they hate it. But the assumptive ask is not about dominance. It is about an internal belief system.
How so?
It is a mindset of expectation that manifests as a relaxed, grounded demeanor. It requires you to genuinely believe that your product or your idea is going to solve the buyer's problem.
So it comes from a place of service.
Exactly. When you tell yourself you are going to win, when you truly, deeply believe in the value of what you are offering, you don't need to be aggressive.
You don't have to force it.
Right. Your tone of voice drops, your inflection is steady, your body language naturally aligned to project a quiet, sturdy confidence.
So you aren't forcing them to do anything.
No, you're simply acting as if their agreement is the most natural, routine, mutually beneficial thing in the world.
So the distinction isn't just the words you use, it's the intent behind the words.
Exactly.
It's not about trapping them in a corner, it's about leading them down a clear hallway.
I love that analogy. You are removing the friction of indecision. Like we said earlier, making a decision is hard work.
It takes effort.
When you are passive, you force the buyer to do all the heavy lifting of figuring out what happens next. You essentially make them the project manager of your deal.
Which they don't want to be.
No. When you are assumptive, you take the burden off their shoulders,
Yeah.
you light the path, you hold the door open, and you say, right this way.
That is a massive paradigm shift. So if you are listening to this on your commute or, sitting at your desk right now, the immediate practical takeaway is a brutal audit of your own vocabulary.
Yes, audit yourself.
Look at the last 10 emails you sent to prospects or internal stakeholders. Strip out the passive qualifiers.
Get rid of them.
If you see the words hoping, maybe, just checking in, or wondering, delete them. Banish them from your pitches.
Banish them completely.
Act as if your request being granted is simply the logical next step in the conversation. Because if you've done your job up to that point, It is.
And remember that your physical posture and your internal monologue dictate that external confidence.
It starts inside.
Right. Before you pick up the phone or before you walk into that boardroom to make the ask, check your self-talk.
What should you be asking yourself?
Are you mentally bracing for a no, or are you expecting a yes? Because whichever reality you are carrying in your head is the reality your prospect is going to subconsciously mirror.
Okay, so you've done it. You've successfully projected this immense confidence.
The mindset is right.
You've used the assumptive language. You didn't use any weak words. And the offer is officially on the table. You say, I recommend getting started with the 20-seat bundle. I'll just need those email addresses. You've executed the first key perfectly, but now you have created a vacuum in the room. And human nature abhors a vacuum.
Oh, it really does.
Which is why what happens in the next 3 to 5 seconds usually destroys the entire deal. This brings us to the second key.
You have to shut up.
You have to shut up. After you ask the question, you must remain completely silent.
The hardest part.
You cannot be intimidated by the silence. Now, if you're listening, that probably sounds like the easiest advice in the world, right? Just don't talk.
Just sit there.
But in practice, when the stakes are high, sitting in that silence is literally excruciating.
It is pure psychological torture for most people. And we really need to explore exactly why it's so excruciating.
Why does it feel so bad?
Because if you don't understand the biology of what is happening to you in that exact moment, you will never be able to control it.
Okay, break down the biology.
When you ask for what you want, you are putting yourself out there completely. You are emotionally exposed with zero guarantees of the outcome.
It's totally unknown.
Right. In that specific micro moment, you are entirely vulnerable. And human beings are biologically, evolutionarily hardwired to detest vulnerability.
Because it's dangerous.
Because vulnerability triggers an overwhelming primal desire to protect ourselves.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just a quirky personality trait where, some people are chatty and some aren't. It is deeply biological.
It goes way back.
We are talking about the science behind the hurt of rejection and exactly how our brains process it.
Yes, the evolutionary biology here is absolutely vital. If you go back to early human history, out on the savannah, our ancestors lived in small tribes.
We had to fit in.
Exactly. If you were sensitive to social rejection, you were more likely to conform to group norms, you stayed in the good graces of the tribe, and you ultimately survived and passed on your DNA.
Right.
If you didn't care about social rejection and you got kicked out of the tribe, you didn't just get your feelings hurt.
You starved.
You starved or you got eaten by a predator. Banishment literally meant death. So our brains evolved to prioritize the pain of social rejection as a critical survival mechanism.
It's a literal threat response.
A massive one. In fact, neurologically speaking, the brain processes social rejection using the exact same pathways it uses to process actual physical pain.
That's crazy to think about.
It is. Specifically, the anterior cingulate cortex lights up in both scenarios. The source material highlights a mind-blowing study that illustrates this perfectly.
Tell me about this study.
Scientists took a group of participants, subjected them to a social exclusion exercise to simulate rejection.
Okay.
And then they gave half of them Tylenol, just normal acetaminophen, and the other half a placebo.
Wait, really?
Yes. And the group that took the Tylenol reported a significant reduction in the emotional pain of being rejected.
Wait, we need to pause on that. You are saying that taking an over-the-counter painkiller actually dulls the emotional sting of someone telling you no?
Yes. Because to your brain, a harsh no is indistinguishable from a physical blow.
Wow.
The Tylenol works because the rejection is activating the exact same neural pathways as, say, a sprained ankle. It is a biological threat.
So let's map this back to the boardroom.
Right. Picture the scene.
You make your confident assumptive ask for $1 million contract. You stop talking. And there is a split second of silence.
Just a moment of quiet.
In that silence, your amygdala, the ancient fear processing center of your brain, starts screaming.
It's ringing the alarm.
It anticipates the physical pain of rejection. It flashes bright red danger signals. And because your brain is desperately trying to save you from this painful, vulnerable exposure, it short circuits.
It tries to rescue you.
Right. Your rational, executive brain shuts off entirely and your mouth opens up to try and save you.
It is a complete physiological hijacking.
Let's paint a picture in slow motion of how this actually looks in the real world, because I guarantee everyone listening has either done this or watched someone do it, and it is universally cringeworthy.
Oh, it's so hard to watch.
You have a salesperson who does everything right. They make the assumptive ask. The prospect looks down at the proposal, furrows their brow slightly, and is quiet for, let's say, 3 full seconds.
Just 3 seconds.
They aren't angry. They are literally just doing the math in their head. And in those 3 seconds, the salesperson's amygdala fires, they panic, and they instantly self-destruct.
Because that silence feels like an hour to them.
An eternity.
The internal pressure becomes unbearable. So to break the tension and protect themselves from the anticipated pain of rejection, they just start babbling.
They say something like, so we could do the 20 seats? Or, if 20 is too much right now, we could start with 10 or 5.
Yes.
Actually, we have an end-of-quarter discount running next month. Maybe we should just wait for that. Or I can throw in free implementation if you sign today. How was your weekend, by the way? Did you end up watching the golf tournament?
It's tragic. It is genuinely tragic to watch.
So bad.
But what you just described is textbook self-sabotage. The salesperson will literally introduce objections that the buyer hadn't even thought of.
They invent problems.
They will over-explain features that were already agreed upon. They will offer discounts that weren't even asked for. They actively, desperately offer the prospect a way out of the deal just to relieve the tension of the silence.
It's crazy.
The prospect was sitting there, getting ready to say, sounds great, let's move forward. And the salesperson talks them right out of the yes and into a, we need to think about it.
It's exactly like pitching a brilliant, fully formed movie idea to a studio executive.
Oh, great analogy.
You lay out the plot, the characters, the ending. It's perfect. The executive is silent because they are processing how good it is, and they're literally reaching for their checkbook.
Right, they're sold.
And before they can speak, you panic at the silence and say, or we could just make it a short film. Or maybe a web series. Or, you know what, we don't have to make it at all. Sorry I even brought it up.
You are literally negotiating against yourself.
Negotiating against yourself?
That is exactly what happens. You negotiate against yourself because you are trying to relieve your own biological anxiety.
It's a relief mechanism.
Yes. But you have to fundamentally understand that silence is where the work gets done. Silence is the crucible.
That's powerful.
When you ask a prospect to make a commitment, they need space to process that commitment. If you interrupt that silence, you are interrupting their decision-making process.
You're pulling them out of the zone.
You are pulling them out of the buying mindset and forcing them to deal with your nervous energy.
So what is the practical, tactical takeaway for the listener when they're in that hot seat? Because knowing the biology is great, but when the adrenaline spikes, how do you actually stop yourself from talking?
You have to force it.
It requires absolute ironclad discipline.
Yeah.
Once you ask the question, you have to build physical anchors to stop yourself from speaking.
Physical anchors, yes.
If you are on a Zoom call or a phone call, physically move your mouse and click the mute button so you cannot accidentally speak.
I do that all the time.
It works. If you are in person, bite the inside of your cheek. Sit on your hands under the table. Dig your fingernails into your palms. You have to let the silence do the heavy lifting. You must force the other person to fill that void.
If we pull back and look at the bigger picture here, mastering the silence is ultimately an exercise in mastering yourself.
Right.
The person who can comfortably sit in silence projects immense, unshakable confidence and authority.
Because it's so rare.
It signals to the buyer that you are entirely secure in the value you are offering, that you don't need to beg, and you certainly don't need to backtrack.
It establishes dominance in a healthy way.
It is an incredibly powerful position to hold in a negotiation, but it requires enduring that spike of biological anxiety without reacting to it.
Okay, so let's say you've done it. You've made the confident, assumptive ask. You've successfully fought your own biology. You dug your fingernails into your palms, and you survived the agonizing silence.
You made it through.
The prospect finally opens their mouth to respond. And this brings us to the third key. Because they aren't always going to say yes.
No, they're not.
You must be prepared to deal with objections. Because they are coming.
They are absolutely coming. It is an unassailable fact of business. When you ask people for commitments, whether it's money, time, or resources, people will push back.
It's just human nature.
It's their natural defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Your brain already knows this, which is why it was bracing for rejection during the silence in the first place. The third key is about transforming that terrifying, unpredictable, unknown into a structured, manageable process.
This introduces the concept of obstacle immunity. How do you immunize yourself against the panic of an objection? Let's use a metaphor here.
I love a good metaphor.
Forget the old cliche of the duck gliding smoothly on the water while paddling frantically underneath. Let's think about this mechanically. Being prepared for objections is like having an anti-lock braking system, an ABS, installed in your brain.
I like that. Walk me through the mechanics of that.
When you're driving on an icy road and a deer jumps out, your primal instinct is to slam on the brakes as hard as you can.
Right. Panic stop.
But if you do that, the wheels lock up, you lose all steering control, and you spin out and crash.
Definitely.
That's the amygdala hijack. That's panicking when you hear a no. What an ABS does is automatically pulse the brakes for you. It forcefully pauses the locking mechanism over and over again incredibly fast so that you maintain traction and can actually steer around the obstacle. Being prepared for objections is your cognitive ABS. It pulses the brakes on your panic so you don't spin out.
That is a brilliant way to frame it, because it highlights that the panic is a natural reflex, but the system overrides it to maintain control.
Exactly.
And the way you build that cognitive ABS is through anticipation and categorization. If you know objections are coming, and you have categorized them and prepared yourself to handle them, you effectively eliminate the fear of the unknown.
You're ready for the deer.
You gain the courage to sit and wait for the buyer to answer, because you know that even if they throw up a massive roadblock, you have a steering mechanism. You aren't going to be caught flat-footed.
So how do we actually build that system? The strategy here relies on a tactical tool called a ledge.
The wedge is critical.
When a prospect hits you with a tough objection or a harsh, unexpected brush-off, your emotional brain wants to react instantly, either by getting defensive, arguing back, or immediately caving and dropping your price.
The spin out.
Right. A ledge is a simple, memorized phrase that you use to pulse the brakes. It pauses the interaction. It gives your rational executive brain the magic quarter second it needs to catch up, process what was just said, and take control back from your emotional brain.
Exactly. A ledge is not a rebuttal. It is a biological timeout.
A timeout.
It's usually a brief acknowledgement or an open-ended clarifying question. So let's say the prospect leans back, crosses their arms and says, "Your price is way too high, we can't possibly do this."
A classic objection.
If you don't have a ledge, you panic. You say, "Well, we can offer a 20% discount."
And you just spun out.
You just spun out.
Yeah.
But if you have a ledge, you pause. You
Mm.
maintain eye contact and you say, "That's interesting. Can you tell me a little more about how you are looking at the budget?"
That's smooth.
Or, just to be sure I understand, what were you comparing that figure against? Or simply, how so?
How so is incredibly elegant because it's only 2 words, but it completely deflects the pressure back to them.
It really does.
It forces them to explain their position, giving you time to breathe and analyze. But I have to ask the skeptical question here. Are we just supposed to memorize scripts like a robot?
People always ask that.
Is the goal to have a binder full of canned responses that we just spit out whenever someone objects? Because buyers are smart. They know when they're being put through a script, and it feels incredibly unnatural and manipulative.
No, absolutely not. And that is a crucial distinction to make. It is not about turning you into an automaton reading from a script. It is about building emotional frameworks.
Okay, frameworks, not scripts.
When you anticipate the roadblock and you have a framework for how to respond, like using a ledge to buy time and then asking a question to isolate their true concern, your amygdala doesn't hijack your brain when the roadblock actually appears.
Because it's expected.
Right. You aren't memorizing a script to manipulate the buyer. You are establishing a framework to manage your own emotional state. You are managing yourself so you can manage the conversation.
Okay, that makes sense. It's structural, not scripted. But to build those frameworks, you have to know what kind of roadblocks to actually expect out there in the wild.
You need a map of the terrain.
We need to break down the landscape of these objections because they aren't all the same. There are 4 main types of objections you'll face, and each one requires a completely different psychological approach.
Let's go through them.
Let's go deep on these. The first one is prospecting objections.
Prospecting objections are the ones you get at the very beginning of the relationship. This is the cold call. This is the unsolicited email.
The toughest part.
You reach out and they immediately say, "I'm busy, send me an email," or "We already use a competitor."
The brush-offs.
Exactly. The psychology here is not about your product or your value. It is purely about time and disruption.
You're an annoyance.
You have interrupted their day, and their immediate reflex is to get rid of you so they can get back to what they were doing.
So you can't argue with them.
The mistake people make here is trying to argue facts. If the prospect says, "We already use a competitor," and you try to explain why your features are better, you lose. They don't care. They aren't listening.
So how do you pulse the brakes on a prospecting objection?
You use a ledge to acknowledge their reality, and then you pivot immediately back to your very small ask, which is usually just time.
Can you give an example?
Sure. You say, I totally understand you're busy, and I'm sure your current provider is doing a great job. That's exactly why I call. I just want to find 15 minutes next Tuesday to introduce myself so you have a backup option if things ever change. How does 10 a.m. look?
Oh, that's good.
You don't fight the objection, you bypass it.
Love that. Okay, the second category is red herrings. These are the weird ones. These are irrelevant issues thrown out by the buyer to distract you and take you off your agenda.
Red herrings are fascinating from a psychological standpoint. Often, a buyer will throw out a red herring because they feel like they are losing control of the conversation,
Oh, so it's a power play.
or because they have an unstated insecurity they don't want to talk about. So, you are presenting a software solution, and right in the middle, the buyer asks, does this integrate with this one obscure legacy system we built in 1998?
And as the salesperson, your instinct is to go right down the rabbit hole.
Of course.
You want to prove how smart your tech team is, so you spend 20 minutes talking about custom API integrations.
And you just lost control of the meeting. You spun out. The buyer doesn't actually care about the 1998 system. They threw it out to test you or to slow you down.
So how do you handle it?
The framework for a red herring is to acknowledge it, but defer it.
What's the ledge for that?
Your ledge is, that's a great question about the integration. I want to make sure we cover that in detail. Let's park that for just a moment, finish reviewing the core architecture, and we will circle back to it. Sound fair?
You pulse the brakes, maintain control of the wheel, and keep driving. Perfect. Okay, category number 3, micro-commitment objections. These happen in the messy middle of a deal.
Yes. A complex deal requires a series of small yeses to keep moving forward. You need them to agree to a discovery call. You need them to introduce you to the technical buyer.
You need them to hand over their data for a pilot program.
Right. When they resist these small steps, like if they say, we don't really want to loop in the IT director just yet, that is a micro-commitment objection.
And what's the psychology there? Why do they stall in the middle of the process?
Friction. Taking the next step requires effort, and human beings are inherently lazy.
Fair enough.
Or they don't perceive enough value yet to justify the effort of looping in their boss. The framework here is to isolate the concern and explain the why.
How does that sound?
You say, I understand you want to keep the circle small for now. The reason I asked to bring in the IT director is that, in our experience, if we don't get their eyes on the security protocols now, it can delay your launch by months at the end of the process. I want to protect your timeline. Can we set up a brief 10-minute intro?
You tie the micro-commitment directly to a benefit they care about. Which brings us to the final and most terrifying category. Buying commitment objections. This is the big one.
The finale.
The finish line. You've asked for the signature, you've asked for the check, and they hesitate.
This is where the biological stakes are highest for both of you. The psychology of a buying commitment objection is almost always rooted in loss aversion and fear of change.
It's scary to commit.
Even if your solution is demonstrably better than their current situation, change represents risk. If they sign the contract and it fails, it's their neck on the line.
Right.
The objection might sound like the price is too high or the timing isn't right, but the underlying emotion is fear.
So how do you handle the big one? You can't just defer it like a red herring.
No, you have to face it head on, but you do it with extreme emotional control. You use your ledge to buy time.
What's the ledge?
I hear you on the timing, and I appreciate you being transparent about that. Then you isolate it to ensure it's the only thing holding them back.
Oh, that's smart.
Just to clarify, aside from the timeline being a bit tight, is there anything else holding us back from partnering today?
And once they confirm it's just the timing,
Then you can collaboratively solve that specific problem, rather than fighting a ghost. By categorizing objections this way, you turn a terrifying infinite unknown into a predictable, solvable puzzle.
it slows everything down.
A red herring requires a completely different response framework than a buying commitment objection. But when you know what category you are dealing with, it radically slows the game down. You recognize the pattern, you deploy your ledge, you maintain your emotional control, and you navigate past it.
So if you're listening, your practical takeaway for this third key is to actively anticipate the friction. Do not ever go into an ask blindly hoping they will just smile and say yes.
Never.
That is a recipe for amygdala hijack. You need to build your own list of the most common objections you face in your specific industry or your specific role. What are the top 5 reasons people tell you no?
Write them down.
Write them down. Categorize them. Are they prospecting brush-offs? Are they buying fears? And then pre-plan your rational responses and your ledges. Write down your ABS phrases.
It's vital preparation.
Preparation is quite literally the only reliable cure for the fear of asking. When you are prepared, you strip the fear of its power over you.
If we pull all of this together and connect it to the bigger picture, all three of these keys, the assumptive ask, mastering the agonizing silence, and being cognitively prepared for objections, are ultimately about one central unifying theme:
What's that theme?
emotional regulation.
Yes. Let's synthesize all of this because the core philosophy here distills down into one single, incredibly powerful and memorable insight.
It's the whole point.
If you take absolutely nothing else away from this entire deep dive, take this concept and burn it into your brain. In every single conversation, the person who exerts the greatest amount of emotional control has the highest probability of getting the outcome they desire.
That is the soul of this chapter. And really, it is the soul of any high-stakes interaction in business or in life.
It really is.
Asking for what you want is not about finding the perfect manipulative combination of magic words that will somehow compel another human being to blindly agree with you.
It's not mind control.
It is entirely, 100%, an exercise in mastering your own disruptive emotions. It is about conquering your ancient biological fear of rejection.
That fear that goes back to the savannah.
Exactly. It is about remaining grounded and rooted when your brain is screaming at you to flee or to babble. It is about projecting a calm, positive expectation when everything inside you feels vulnerable.
And when you do that,
When you successfully master your own internal state, you naturally begin to positively influence the emotions, the trust, and the decisions of the person sitting across the table from you.
it's so profound because it shifts the focus entirely. We spend so much time obsessing over what the other person is thinking. What are they going to say? How will they react? What if they get mad?
We project so much onto them.
But the battle isn't actually with them. The battle is entirely internal. The battle is against your own amygdala.
It's you against you.
If you can win the internal fight for emotional control, the external negotiation becomes infinitely easier. You are no longer fighting the prospect. You are guiding them.
And you guide them by applying those three disciplines relentlessly, day in and day out. You ask with absolute, unwavering confidence, assuming the yes, and carrying the cognitive load for them.
Right.
Shut your mouth, you hit the mute button, and you endure the vulnerability of silence, allowing them the necessary space to process and make a decision.
And you prepare.
And you prepare for their inevitable biological resistance so thoroughly that when they do push back, you don't spin out. You remain as calm and controlled as a driver in engaging their ABS, using a ledge to maintain your equilibrium and navigate the objection rationally.
It is a complete masterclass in human psychology, evolutionary biology, and self-mastery. Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
I love a good takeaway.
I want you to think about the last time you got a hard no. Think about a big deal that stalled out, a pitch that fell flat in the boardroom, or a request for resources that was instantly denied by your boss.
A painful memory, but a necessary one.
Be honest with yourself as you replay that tape. Was it actually a firm no to the quality of your product, the brilliance of your idea, or the undeniable value you bring?
Or was it something else?
Or was it a subconscious reaction to your own passive, insecure delivery? Did you infect them with your own doubt by using weak, wishy-washy words?
Did you panic?
Right. Did you panic, interrupt the silence, and literally negotiate against yourself before they even had a chance to answer? Are you creating your own ghosts, generating objections that wouldn't even exist if you had simply maintained your emotional control?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because once you recognize how your own evolutionary fear of rejection is manifesting in your daily behavior, you can start actively changing the outcomes of your interactions.
You take the power back.
You stop being a victim of circumstance, you start blaming the market or the leads, and you start being a deliberate architect of your own success.
And now that you know exactly how to ask and how to maintain that critical emotional control under pressure, you need to know exactly what you are up against when they inevitably do push back.
Because they will.
Because as we established, they will.
Yeah.
You've got your ABS installed, now you need to know the track. Next time, we are diving even deeper into Chapter 3 to completely unmask those 4 specific types of objections we just touched on.
Oh, it could be good.
We are going to explore exactly how to systematically dismantle and turn around prospecting, red herring, micro-commitment, and buying objections so you never lose a deal to panic again. You will not want to miss it. Picture this. You're a salesperson or a founder or just someone trying to get a project greenlit at your company.
Right. Anyone trying to convince another person to do something.
Exactly. And you are on an absolute mission. So let's call our guy Richard.
Okay, Richard.
Richard has his sights set on this major prospect. And when I say he's relentless, I mean he is borderline obsessive.
Like, won't take no for an answer kind of guy.
Not even close. He leaves 71 voicemail messages. 71. Just asking for a simple appointment.
Wait, 71? That is, I mean, the sheer psychological resilience required to do that without quitting is staggering.
Right. Most of us would feel so rejected we'd just delete the contact and move on after, like, voicemail number 5?
Yeah, or email number 3.
Well, he sends 18 emails, too. And he's basically stalking this prospect on LinkedIn. And he actually manages to get them on the phone 3 separate times over 5 grueling months.
Let me guess, he gets brushed off every single time.
Every time. But Richard does not quit. He calls, he writes, he connects with every single key stakeholder in the organization. 5 months of just asking.
It's the absolute definition of relentless pursuit.
It really is. But then, in May, 5 months after his very first attempt, Richard catches the prospect at just the right time.
Oh, finally.
Yeah, the prospect actually recognizes his voice. Maybe they feel this subconscious obligation because of his sheer persistence. And they finally agree to a software demo.
Okay, so he's in the door.
He's in. And here's the kicker. Richard absolutely nails the demo.
Nice.
The software is genuinely impressive. It completely solves this massive training delivery problem for the prospect, and the prospect is entirely transparent about how much they like it.
So it's looking like a guaranteed win.
It looks perfect. Less than an hour later, Richard confidently asks for the commitment to buy. He's literally at the finish line. And boom, the prospect says, without even thinking, "Richard, it looks like a great program, and I really like it. But I'm going to need to discuss it with my team before we commit to anything."
Ah, there it is.
Yep, they say, "My schedule is packed. Getting everyone up to speed is a huge distraction, and I just do not want to buy yet another software program that everyone is excited about today but never actually uses."
The classic objection. I mean, after all that work, after all that emotional investment, 5 months of grinding, and he just hits a massive, impenetrable brick wall right at the moment of truth.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this, because if you are listening to this deep dive, you have probably felt that exact stomach drop.
Oh, absolutely. We all have.
When you finally get that crucial no after months of trying, do you freeze? Like, do you panic and immediately talk yourself right out of a deal? Or do you know exactly, systematically, how to turn that moment around?
Because that is the reality of business.
It is. So today, we are taking a deep dive into the exact science of getting past that no. We're pulling insights from Chapter 3 of Jeb Blount's work, Objections, the ultimate guide for mastering the art and science of getting past no.
Which is such a crucial text.
It really is. We want to figure out exactly what was happening in Richard's head, and more importantly, what was happening in his buyer's head.
And this matters deeply for anyone listening, really. We're talking about the distinct types of resistance you meet when you're trying to persuade another human being.
It's psychology of it all.
Exactly. In this world, there is what the source material calls a democracy of objections.
A democracy of objections. I love that phrase.
It's so true, though. It absolutely does not matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you sell, what your title is, or how long your sales cycle takes. You are going to face objections.
The universe does not care if you're a 30-year veteran or a rookie on your first day.
Right. And understanding the distinct types of resistance you meet and mapping them to where you are in a negotiation, that is the ultimate shortcut to shortening your sales cycle and increasing your income.
So we aren't just going to give you a list of things to say. We're going to explore the psychology of why people say no and how you can navigate it.
Yeah, the underlying mechanics of it.
But before we get into the actual types of objections, I think we need to clear the air a bit. We need to talk about what everyone wishes existed, but actually doesn't.
You mean the myth of the silver bullet?
Yes, because if you look at the sheer volume of sales books, online courses, and, LinkedIn gurus out there, they're all selling a script.
They promise these magic words, right? Like you can just instantly hypnotize a buyer into saying yes.
Exactly. It's a massive industry.
But it's built on a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. Here's the reality we just have to accept right up front. Buyers do not go to objection school.
Right. There's no secret textbook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They do not have a hidden textbook of rebuttals that they study in the dark. Yet salespeople and negotiators obsess over finding shortcuts.
They want the magic words to counteract a resistance that the buyer is often just making up on the fly.
Right. It reminds me of a golfer who is going through a terrible slump.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, instead of looking at their stance or their grip or the actual mechanics of their swing, what do? They go to the pro shop and spend $500 on a new putter.
Thinking, this is the perfect putter. This piece of metal is going to miraculously shave 20 strokes off my game overnight.
Exactly. But the putter doesn't fix your inability to read the green.
People want to avoid the emotional pain of rejection so badly that they look for magic fairy dust. They want the equipment to do the work.
And today you see an endless line of pseudo-experts and, AI witch doctors claiming they have the perfect foolproof script.
Or like the ultimate automated email sequence that will slay objections and stun prospects into submission without you ever having to feel the sting of being told no.
Right, which is just fantasy.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second. Because
Yeah.
if scripts are so fundamentally bad, why are they everywhere?
That's a fair question.
Like, why do so many massive companies hand their new hires a literal binder full of scripts on day one?
Mm.
Aren't these turnaround frameworks we're about to discuss just scripts in disguise? Like, aren't we just putting a fancy word on the same old concept?
That is a critical distinction to make, and I'm really glad you brought it up. We have to clarify the nuance here. Scripts do have a place, but only in very specific environments.
Like what kind of environments?
Well, if you are in a highly transactional, high-turnover, one-call close situation, imagine you're selling a $50 widget over the phone in a boiler room where the relationship doesn't matter and you just need pure volume.
Okay.
In that case, yes, road scripts can work. You just read the words, play the numbers game, and move on.
Right, that's where you see the old school bait and switch tactics, or those really uncomfortable sycophantic tie downs like, you do want to save money for your family, don't you?
Ugh, exactly. Just awful. But for complex deals, for modern business-to-business sales or any situation where you actually have to maintain a relationship with the person after the transaction, those cheesy 20th century scripts fall completely flat.
Why though? What changed?
The modern buyer changed. They're infinitely more informed today than they were 30 years ago. They see right through a script.
They know when they're being managed.
Exactly. The moment they hear you reading a pre-planned, manipulative sequence of words, their defenses go up. Using a rigid script in a complex deal leaves you feeling like a phony. It actively destroys the trust in the relationship, and ironically, it actually increases the buyer's resistance.
So instead of a script, the source material argues we need agile frameworks.
Yes. Agile frameworks.
Okay, so break that down for me. What is the actual mechanical difference between a script and a framework?
Well, a script dictates the exact words you must say, regardless of what the other person is feeling or doing. It's rigid. A framework, on the other hand, gives you a set of flexible rails to run on.
Flexible rails, okay.
Think of it like a jazz musician. A script is playing a piece of classical music exactly as it's written on the page. If you play a wrong note, the whole thing derails.
Right.
But a framework is knowing the underlying chord progression. You understand the structure, but you adapt your melody to the context of the situation, the mood of the room, and the notes the other musicians are playing.
Oh, I see it now.
Yeah, a framework manages your own disruptive emotions, and most importantly, it pulls the prospect toward you rather than pushing them away.
A script is trying to force the buyer down a narrow hallway. A framework is just making sure you both stay in the same building, but you can take whatever path makes sense.
Precisely.
So if you're listening to this and you want to eliminate rejection entirely from your professional life, the only way to actually do that is to literally never ask for anything ever again.
Right. To avoid the no, you have to forfeit the yes. You cannot avoid objections. The real work is in categorizing them.
Categorizing them into the 4 types.
Exactly. Once you understand that objections are not just one big scary monster, but rather 4 very distinct types of behavioral responses, you can actually navigate them.
Which brings us to the chronological journey of a deal. Let's start at the very beginning of the timeline. The first type of prospecting objections. The source material calls this the reflex.
The reflex. These happen at the absolute earliest stage of the sales process.
Like when you're making a cold call or sending a cold email outreach.
Exactly. And your singular focus goal in that moment is just to secure a meeting. You aren't trying to sell the product yet. You are literally just trying to sell the next block of time.
Let's talk about the biological reality of this moment, the rule of thirds in prospecting. When you reach out to someone cold, You have roughly 15 to 20 seconds to get an answer.
Yes. And why only 15 to 20 seconds? Because you are an interruption.
Right.
When you interrupt someone's day, their brain instantly goes into a sorting mode. It's an evolutionary mechanism. Their brain asks, is this a threat? Is this important? Or is this garbage I can ignore?
And you have a tiny window before their brain categorizes you as garbage.
Exactly. And according to the data, 1/3 of the time, the prospect will actually say yes and give you a meeting.
Not because you're a genius, but just because you happen to call at the exact right time when they were thinking about a problem you can solve.
Right. Lucky timing. And then another third of the time, they are going to say a hard, definitive no, and they mean it.
Like their budget is 0, or they just signed a 5-year contract with your competitor.
Yeah, it's a real no. But that middle third, that is where the magic happens. 1/3 of the time, they're going to throw out a reflex response, an objection.
We call these RBOs, reflex behavior objections. And it's crucial to understand that these are not deeply thought out, logical rejections of your product.
How could they be? They don't even know what your product does yet.
Exactly. They are just a reflex. It is the verbal equivalent of a doctor tapping your knee with a rubber hammer and your leg kicking out.
Yes. The prospect is just trying to get off the phone. They are busy, they are stressed, and their default reflex to an interruption is to create distance.
Okay, let's act this out because I want to feel how this works in real time. I'll be the prospect, you be the salesperson.
Sounds good.
Let's say I'm sitting at my desk, I'm stressed about a deadline, my phone rings, I see a number I don't recognize, and I pick it up. You introduce yourself, and I immediately hit you with the reflex. I say, look, I'm really busy. I don't have time for this right now.
Now let's pause and look at what happens biologically to an unprepared rep in this exact moment.
Okay, let's look at the biology.
When a weak rep hears, I don't have time, their brain perceives it as a sudden threat. Rejection.
Fight or flight response kicks in.
Yes, the amygdala fires. Adrenaline spikes into the bloodstream. And here is the fascinating physiological part blood actually rushes away from your neocortex.
And the neocortex is the rational, logical thinking part of your brain, right?
Exactly. The blood rushes away from the logic center and it floods into your muscles, preparing you to either punch a tiger or run away from it.
Which is incredibly unhelpful when you are sitting in an ergonomic office chair trying to book a Zoom meeting.
Totally unhelpful.
Yeah.
You literally cannot think straight because your brain is starved of blood.
Which is why the unprepared rep panics.
Yes. They usually do one of two things. They trigger the flight response and start begging.
Yeah.
Like, oh, please, it will just take a second. I promise I'll be quick.
Or they trigger the fight response and try to force it. They start word vomiting their entire pitch at double speed, hoping to get all the features out before the prospect hangs up.
Which practically guarantees the prospect is going to hang up.
Yeah.
If you speed up and sound frantic, they feel even more justified in wanting to get away from you.
Exactly. But an ultra-high performer operates entirely differently.
Right, because they use a framework. Their neocortex doesn't have to work as hard. They don't have to invent a response on the fly while their brain is screaming at them. They use something called non-complementary behavior.
Non-complementary behavior. What does that mean?
Well, human beings naturally mirror each other. If I raise my voice, you raise yours. If I push you, you push back. That's complementary behavior.
Okay.
Non-complementary behavior is intentionally doing the exact opposite of what the other person's emotional state expects. If you act rushed and defensive, I act calm and accommodating.
Okay, let's run the scenario again with that in mind. I'm the stressed prospect. Look, I'm really busy. I don't have time for this right now.
Instead of fighting you, I stay perfectly calm. I might even lower my voice slightly to force you to listen closer. I say, you know what, 5 minutes is not nearly enough time for me to learn about you and your company. Pitching my product without deeply understanding your issues would be a massive disservice to you and it would waste your time. You deserve better than that. Why don't we reschedule for Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock?
Whoa. Okay, let's dissect what just happened in my brain as the buyer. I was expecting you to fight me. My defenses were all the way up, ready to push back against your push.
But I didn't push.
You didn't.
Yeah.
You entirely agreed with me. You validated my lack of time. You literally said 5 minutes wasn't enough time.
I stepped out of the way of your punch.
Yeah.
And because there was no resistance for you to push against, your aggressive posture just collapsed.
And then you pivoted immediately into an assumptive ask. You didn't say, when is a good time for you? You said, Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Right. Because you are busy and stressed, I want to reduce your cognitive load. If I ask, when are you free? You have to open your mental calendar, look at your schedule, make a decision. That's too much work.
Yeah, that's just another chore for me.
Exactly. If I offer a specific time, all you have to do is say yes to get me off the phone. And suddenly, I have a meeting.
The ultimate takeaway for this first stage is anticipation. You know you are going to get RBOs. They are entirely predictable.
Very predictable.
Yeah.
I don't have time. Just send me an email. We already have a vendor for that.
Right. And because you can anticipate them, you can map out your frameworks in advance, you rank them by frequency, you memorize your non-complementary turnaround, and you save your rational brain from having to do the heavy lifting while it's being drained of blood.
Beautifully stated. You become immune to the reflex.
Okay, so assuming you execute that perfectly, you get past the prospecting phase, you secure the meeting. Fast forward a few days, and you are sitting face-to-face in their boardroom, or, you're logging on to the initial discovery Zoom call.
And you're feeling good.
But you aren't safe yet, because now the buyer's defense mechanism shifts from avoidance to distraction. This brings us to the second type of objection, red herring objection,
Right.
like the old hunting term, dragging a smelly fish across the trail to distract the hounds. These occur early in initial meetings. And the source material points out that they are specifically designed, often subconsciously by the prospect, to make you lose control of the conversation.
Red herrings are absolutely fascinating from a psychological perspective because they don't prey on your fear. They prey on your ego and your desperate urge to pitch.
Oh, that's dangerous.
It is. The prospect throws out a shiny object, usually a complaint or a very specific granular question about a feature, and the salesperson just can't help themselves. They bite.
We have a fantastic, highly detailed example from the source material that perfectly illustrates this. It's a classic, terrible customer service trap.
Let's do it.
I want to act this out in two ways. First, let's do scenario A, where the host me deliberately fails, representing the average salesperson.
Okay, I will be the buyer this time. We sit down for our very first meeting. You just took out your notepad. You haven't even asked me a single question yet. And I lean over the table, cross my arms, and say, listen, the last time we used your company, we had a terrible experience with your customer service. It was a nightmare. If you can't guarantee a better job this time, there is no way we can buy from you again.
Okay, stepping into the shoes of the average salesperson, I instantly feel like my company, and by extension my own professional pride, is being attacked.
Right, your ego flares up.
My need for significance flares up. I feel the urge to defend my territory. So I argue back with logic and statistics. I say, look, I don't know what went wrong with the team last time you worked with us, but I can assure you our customer satisfaction rating is currently 96%. It is literally the highest in our entire industry, and it's driven by our new 5-star quality assurance process.
And as the buyer, my blood pressure just spiked. You just told me my personal painful experience doesn't matter because of your spreadsheet.
I totally invalidated you.
Yes. So I dig my heels in deeper. I say, yeah. Well, that's the exact same thing your rep said 3 years ago. It was a complete lie. Your product quality was shoddy. Nobody ever called us back when things broke. And honestly, the only reason I let you in here today is to see if you can beat your competitor's price.
Ouch. And just like that, the win probability drops to absolute zero.
It's gone. The meeting is effectively over 3 minutes after it started.
But wait, let me analyze why that failed so spectacularly. Everything I said was factually true. Our rating is 96%. Why did stating a true fact destroy the deal?
Because you cannot argue people into believing they are wrong about their own feelings.
Wow, yeah.
The prospect has a deep, visceral, emotional anchor to that bad experience. When you bring out statistics and logic to tell them essentially that they shouldn't feel that way, you are invalidating their reality. You're calling them irrational.
And a human being will fight you to the death to protect their reality.
Exactly. So it's not an argument about software or service anymore. It's a battle of egos. You took the bait. You chased the red herring down a rabbit hole of defensiveness.
Okay, let's rebuild this. Let's do scenario B, the framework. I'm going to play the ultra-high performer facing the exact same trap.
Okay, I'm the angry buyer again. The last time we used your company, we had a terrible experience with your customer service. If you can't guarantee a better job this time, there is no way we can buy from you again.
Okay, this time, I pause. I take a breath to suppress my own ego. I look you in the eye and acknowledge the pain without defending myself. I say, gosh, I am so sorry to hear that. You absolutely shouldn't have had to deal with that.
Let me stop you right there. What did you just do?
I used empathy right out of the gate. But wait a minute. Let me play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
If a prospect aggressively attacks my company's customer service, and my first response is to say, I'm so sorry, Doesn't that make me look incredibly weak? Aren't I just validating their attack and admitting fault right off the bat?
That is the fear that drives the average salesperson to argue. But there's a massive psychological difference between empathy and agreement.
Empathy versus agreement.
Right. Saying, I'm sorry you had to deal with that is not saying, my company is awful and it was our fault. It is simply validating their emotional experience. You are saying, I see that you are frustrated and your frustration is valid.
And what does that do?
The moment you validate their emotion, the tension leaves the room. They feel heard. And a buyer who feels heard stops yelling.
Okay, that makes sense. I've lowered the temperature. But I still haven't answered their objection about the customer service.
Because you aren't going to. Not yet, anyway. You are going to save it for later. And crucially, you are going to frame the structure of the conversation to take control back. Go ahead.
So after I say I'm sorry they dealt with that, I pivot. I say, I tell you what, if it's okay with you, why don't we start off today with a few questions that will allow me to learn more about your unique demands. Then, later on, I can show you some of the specific positive changes we've made to our service team since we last worked together. From there, we can decide together if it makes sense to move to the next step. Does that sound fair?
And as the buyer, because I feel heard and not attacked, and because you laid out a logical, non-threatening agenda, I nod and say, okay, that sounds fair.
And then I immediately take control with an open-ended question that has absolutely nothing to do with the red herring. I say, before we get into the weeds, I noticed on your LinkedIn profile that you've been with this company for 17 years. What are the biggest changes you've seen in this industry since you started?
Masterful. You completely sidestepped the trap. You didn't ignore their concern. You put it in a parking lot for later, and you instantly grabbed the steering wheel.
And here's where the psychology gets really profound. By taking control, I'm not domineering them. I'm actually making them feel good.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are dealing with human neurochemistry here. The rubber meets the road at that control step. Whoever's asking the open-ended questions is in control of the emotional dynamic of the room.
The source material brings up a fascinating Harvard study about this exact phenomenon, the self-disclosure loop. Break that down for us.
Oh, it's incredible research by Dr. Jason Mitchell and Dr. Diana Tamir. They put human subjects into an fMRI machine to scan their brain activity, and they simply allowed the subjects to talk about themselves.
Just talk about themselves.
Right. And what they found was that the mesolimbic dopamine system, the exact same area of the brain associated with pleasure and reward, the area that lights up when you eat a fantastic meal, or receive money, or even take cocaine, lights up like a Christmas tree when humans self-disclose.
Wow. So talking about yourself is literally a biological reward. It's a dopamine hit.
Exactly. When a prospect reveals something about their opinions, their history, or their problems, their brain gives them a shot of dopamine.
That physically feels good.
Yes, which rewards the behavior, so they reveal a little more, which gives them another shot. It forms a self-sustaining loop. If you ask a well-crafted, open-ended question, and then just shut your mouth and listen actively, the prospect will start spilling the beans.
They'll reveal everything.
They will reveal their true operational problems, their hidden objections, the politics of their office, their actual budget, all because it biologically feels good to talk to someone who is truly listening.
But if I get anxious and interrupt them to pitch a feature of my product...
You shatter the loop, you cut off the dopamine supply, and their defensive walls go right back up.
So the practical realization for you here is that when you face an early red herring, you must never chase it. Do not debate the minutiae of a feature or a past failure in the first 5 minutes.
Never.
Acknowledge the concern with genuine empathy, set it on the agenda for later, and immediately ask an open-ended question that activates that dopamine-driven self-disclosure loop. Let their biology do the heavy lifting for you.
Exactly. Let the biology work for you.
Okay, so we've successfully bypassed the initial reflex brush-off. We got into the room, we navigated the early red herrings, and used the dopamine loop to complete a fantastic deep discovery conversation. We understand their pain points.
So we are moving along the timeline of the deal.
Right. Now we hit a structural roadblock, the third type of micro-commitment objections, the stall.
Ah, the stall. This is where momentum goes to die. A micro-commitment is exactly what it sounds like. It is a small, incremental ask designed to advance the deal to the next logical stage.
Right, because in a complex B2B sale, you rarely go from discovery straight to a massive contract.
Never. You have steps.
Mm-hmm.
It could be asking for a signature on a non-disclosure agreement so you can look at their data, or scheduling a formal demo with their wider team, or getting an introduction to the chief financial officer.
And the book points out that these micro-commitment objections are the absolute bane of sales organizations because they completely stall pipeline velocity. Everything just grinds to a halt.
It's so frustrating.
You leave the meeting thinking it went great, you ask for the NDA, and they say, let me run this by legal and get back to you, and then crickets.
And there are typically 7 distinct reasons why buyers brush you off when you ask for a next step. It is a diagnostic checklist, and it's crucial for any professional to understand these because if you diagnose it wrong, you apply the wrong fix.
Let's run through them. I want to explore these because they are very revealing. Reason number 1, they just don't see the value in investing more time with you.
Yep, lack of value.
Reason number 2, they don't understand why they should invest more time with you. Meaning, you haven't explained the purpose of the next step clearly.
Which is on you.
Right. Reason number 3, they feel the meeting they just had with you was a waste of time because you pitched too much or were totally unprepared.
Reason 3 is what the author hilariously calls getting pitch slapped. You didn't listen, you just talked at them for 45 minutes.
Pitch slapping. I love that. Reason 4, they just don't like you.
Which hurts the ego, but it's a reality we have to accept. Sometimes personalities clash.
Yeah. Reason 5, they are not the actual decision maker and they are embarrassed to admit it, so they stall.
Very common.
Reason 6, they've already decided not to do business with you, but they are conflict avoidant and don't want to say no to your face.
Oh, the glow fade.
And reason 7, they are just using you as a pawn to get a competitive quote so they can negotiate a better deal with their current vendor.
What is vital here is learning to quickly distinguish between these reasons. If you're dealing with reasons 5 through 7, there is likely no deal to be had anyway.
They're just wasting time.
Exactly. Asking for the micro-commitment early flushes that reality out so you can cut your losses and move on to a real prospect. If it's reasons 3 and 4, you need to take a hard look in the mirror and fix your own behavior. Stop pitch slapping people. Listen more. Develop some self-awareness.
But reasons 1 and 2, that is where the gold is. They just don't understand the value of the next step. That is an objection you can turn around.
Exactly. Buyers are incredibly protective of their time. They will only agree to a micro-commitment if you clearly and explicitly articulate the value trade.
The value trade. What exactly are they getting in exchange for the friction and effort of taking this next step?
Right, and you can't just say, it will be great. There are 3 specific types of value you can offer. Emotional value, insight value, or tangible value.
Let's break those down.
Emotional value usually revolves around lowering their stress or reducing their perceived risk. Insight value is giving them something they didn't have before, maybe new data about their market, a benchmark report on their competitors, or a fresh perspective on a problem.
Okay, and tangible value.
Tangible value is a concrete, hands-on experience, like a highly customized software demo using their actual data, or a free trial period.
Let's look at a concrete example of how to execute this. Sometimes, to get past a stall and secure that micro-commitment, you have to use a psychological judo move called the takeaway technique.
Oh, this is a great one.
Remember Richard from our opening story? The guy who called 71 times.
I will never forget Richard.
When Richard finally got his prospect to admit they liked the software, the prospect stalled. They said they didn't want to buy another program that nobody uses. That is a massive stall based on the fear of hassle.
Right, the hassle factor.
But Richard didn't argue. He used a brilliant takeaway to secure the micro-commitment. Here is what he said. I completely understand that fear. Since this isn't a long-term commitment and you can quit any time, if we get it set up and your team doesn't use the program, we can simply shake hands and part ways. There isn't much to lose here, and there's a lot to gain, so why don't we get your account set up today and let me make this incredibly easy for you.
That is a masterclass in behavioral economics.
Let's look at the mechanics of why that worked.
First, he explicitly articulated the emotional value. Let me make this incredibly easy for you. He is absorbing the hassle. Then he used a relaxed takeaway. If they don't use it, we shake hands and part ways.
It's counterintuitive. You think pulling away would make them leave, but it acts like a magnet.
Because it completely eliminates their perceived risk. When a salesperson is pushing, the buyer feels trapped. When you take the pressure away, when you literally give them permission to walk away with no hard feelings, the psychological trapdoor opens.
Oh, wow, yeah.
They no longer feel threatened, so they naturally lean back in toward the value.
But there is a catch. And this might be the most difficult skill for a salesperson to master. What is the absolute most critical part of this framework?
Shut up and ask again.
Yes, you articulate the value trade, you use the relaxed takeaway, and then you ask for the next step again. Why don't we get your account set up? And then You close your mouth.
You lock it shut.
You lock it shut. You do not let the awkward pause make you start blabbing. Silence is your best friend here, but it feels like your worst enemy.
I cannot emphasize enough how many deals die right in this exact 5-second window. The salesperson asks for the micro commitment. The prospect pauses to think about it. And because the salesperson's adrenaline is pumping, that silence feels agonizing. It feels like rejection.
So they panic.
They panic. And so they start talking to fill the void. They say, or, we could do it next week. Or I could offer you a discount. They introduce brand new objections that the buyer wasn't even thinking about. They offer unprompted concessions. They literally negotiate against themselves and talk themselves right out of the deal.
If you're listening to this, you've probably done it. You've felt that silence stretching out and you just word vomited a discount. The biological reason why you do it is because silence feels like a social threat.
Exactly.
But the practical takeaway is clearest. Articulate the specific value of the next step, use a relaxed takeaway to lower the risk, ask confidently for the commitment, and then physically mute your microphone or bite the inside of your cheek if you have to. Let the buyer process the information. Let them answer.
Which brings us, finally, to the summit of the mountain. We have navigated the reflexes, the red herrings, and the stalls. We have reached the final stage, the fourth type of objection, the final boss.
Buying commitment objections.
This is the moment of truth.
Okay.
You are asking for the actual business, the signature on the contract, the transfer of funds. This is what most people think of when they hear the term sales objections. Right. It requires the highest level of nuance, the most extreme emotional control, and a robust sequential process. The source material provides a brilliant 5-step objection turnaround framework for this exact moment.
Okay, we are going to spend significant time here because this is the absolute core of closing complex deals. If you master this, your entire trajectory changes.
It really does.
The 5 steps are relate, isolate, clarify, minimize, and ask. Let's break these down meticulously. Step 1, relate.
We touched on this earlier, but it is vital here. Relate means empathizing with their fear without agreeing with their premise. You are stepping into their shoes, human to human.
Right.
If a buyer says your prices are way too high compared to your competitors, you do not argue the math yet, but you also do not say, you're right, we are too expensive.
You say something like, I get how you might feel that way. Looking at the bottom line, they sometimes do seem a little higher than our competitors, and nobody wants to pay more than they absolutely should.
Exactly. You are validating their desire to protect their company's money. It proves you are listening. It instantly lowers their defensive shields and prevents the conversation from turning into a combat sport.
Okay, shields are down. Step 2, isolate. This is fascinating because this is where a massive percentage of reps fail. They fall into a trap that the book calls the pump and pounce habit. What is pump and pounce?
Pump and pounce is driven by poor impulse control. The buyer throws out an objection, and because the salesperson is so eager to prove their worth, they immediately pounce on it and try to solve it before they even know if it's the real problem.
Let's role play that so we can see how disastrous it is.
Yeah.
I'll be the buyer. Your price is just too high.
Well, if price is the only issue, I can talk to my manager and offer a 10% discount today.
Okay, well, even with the discount, we're really worried about the implementation timeline. We need this up in 30 days.
Oh, no problem. We can expedite the shipping and put 2 teams on it to get it done in 20 days.
All right, but I still need to run this entire new timeline by our legal department, and they take weeks.
Notice what is happening here. The salesperson is engaged in an endless, exhausting game of whack-a-mole.
Yeah, I'm just making up excuses as I go.
You are. And I'm just swinging a hammer at every problem that pops up, giving away margin and resources and getting nowhere. Why? Because the very first objection a buyer gives you at the closing table is almost never the real objection.
It's a smokescreen.
It is a smokescreen. It's just the easiest excuse they could think of to delay the pain of making a decision.
Wow. So jumping straight to a discount is basically answering a question they didn't really ask. So how do you stop the whack-a-mole game?
You have to isolate the true objection. You have to put a fence around it.
Mm-hmm.
After you relate, you ask a very specific, isolating question. I totally get that you need to run this by your boss, but I'm just curious, outside of your boss needing to look at this, what are your biggest concerns? Or, other than the price, is there anything else holding us back from moving forward today?
You force them to put all their cards on the table. You isolate to find the true pressing issue before you attempt to solve anything.
Right.
Which leads directly to step 3, clarify. Because even when you successfully isolate the real objection, you probably don't actually know what they mean by it.
Assuming you know what a buyer's objection means is fatal. Words have different meanings to different people based on their context.
Give me an example.
A buyer might say, "I'm deeply concerned about your capacity." You, the salesperson, might panic and assume they think your manufacturing plant can't handle their regular monthly volume over the next year.
Right.
So you launch into a defensive monologue about your supply chain robustness in your new warehouse. But what the buyer actually meant was they are worried about the very first initial bulk order meeting a specific holiday deadline next month.
Oh, wow. So you aren't even speaking the same language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are solving a problem they don't have, which makes them think you don't understand their business at all.
So how do you clarify without sounding like you are interrogating them?
Use gentle, open-ended questions. Avoid leading questions that put words in their mouth. Two of the most powerful, disarming questions you can ask in the English language are simply, "How so?" or "How do you mean?"
Let me try that. When you say you're concerned about delivery times, how do you mean?
It's perfect. It's non-threatening. It forces the buyer to unpack their own vague objection into specific, tangible details that you can actually address. And again, you are activating that self-disclosure loop.
You're listening deeply.
Yes, you are discovering the root cause of the hesitation, not just the symptom.
Okay, so we've related to their fear, we've isolated the real issue, and we've clarified exactly what it means. Now we are ready for the heavy lifting. Step 4, minimize. This is the most complex step in the entire framework.
It is, because this is where you have to do battle with deep-seated cognitive biases. When a buyer is at the final commitment stage, they are fighting two massive psychological forces, the status quo bias and the safety bias.
Let's pause there. Why is it that a buyer would rather lose money or suffer with a bad vendor than switch to a good one? That makes no logical sense.
Logically, no. But biologically, it makes perfect sense. The status quo bias is the brain's preference for things to stay exactly the way they are. Change requires burning cognitive calories, and it introduces unknown variables.
So it's easier to just do nothing.
Yes. From an evolutionary standpoint, staying in your current cave, even if it's drafty and uncomfortable, is perceived as safer than moving to a new cave that might have a bear in it.
Okay, and the safety bias.
The safety bias tells the buyer that making a bad decision is worse than making no decision at all. If they stay with the bad vendor, it's an annoyance. If they champion your new product and it fails, they could get fired.
So the fear of the unknown is outweighing the desire for improvement. Minimizing is the process of reversing that scale. You have to reduce the emotional size of their fear while maximizing the value of your proposal.
Exactly. And the only way you can do this is by leveraging the yeses and the data you collected during your discovery phase.
Yeah.
You cannot minimize an objection at the end of a deal if you didn't do a thorough discovery at the beginning.
Yeah.
You need ammunition.
Let's look at a very detailed example from the text to show how this works in practice. This is the Phoenix office example.
This is a great one.
The scenario is this. The salesperson has presented the solution, asked for the business, and the buyer wants to stall. I will play the buyer. This looks great, but we just need a couple of more weeks to evaluate everything before we sign.
Now, as the seller, I have already related, isolated, and clarified. I know the stall is the only issue. Now I move to minimize. I need to create cognitive dissonance. I need to make the pain of stalling greater than the fear of moving forward. I reach back into the discovery data and I say, I totally get that. With no room for error, you've got to get this right. Here's what worries me, though. You told me it's going to take 60 days to get this project fully implemented and tested. Tomorrow, we are exactly 90 days out from your hard deadline to have the Phoenix office online, and we still need to go through your legal department, which you said takes a few weeks. If you take 2 more weeks to evaluate, I honestly don't see how we'll be able to commit to the installation plan. Would it be possible to push your Phoenix installation deadline out by 2 or 3 weeks?
Ooh, that is a brilliant surgical reversal. As the buyer, my blood pressure just went up. Not at you, at the situation. You just threatened the one thing I care about most. I rub my temples and say, no, that deadline is set in stone by the board. It is unmovable.
And then I remind you of your own logic. I remind you of your own yeses. I say gently, well, this means we can't afford to push this off one more day. We've given you an implementation plan you agreed is the best for your project. You agreed our equipment met your quality standards, and your users rated our software higher than the other platforms you looked at. All the ducks are in a row, and if we start today, we will make your deadline. Is there any reason not to move forward?
And as the buyer, the cognitive dissonance is resolved. The fear of missing the board's deadline and looking incompetent is now massively bigger than the fear of signing the contract. The status quo is no longer safe, it's dangerous. So I say, you make good points. I guess not. What's our next step?
Notice what the seller did not do. They didn't argue logic about why their software is better. They didn't beg for the sale. They leveraged the buyer's own self-imposed deadline to create intense urgency.
Because anything that creates genuine urgency is absolute kryptonite against the status quo bias. That is incredibly powerful. Let's look at one more example of minimizing, because this one comes up all the time. The gym ROI example.
Oh, yes.
This is about the fear of justifying cost to a superior. Jim, the buyer, wants the product, but he wants to think it over. Through isolating and clarifying, the seller uncovers the real hidden issue. Jim is terrified of the internal political risk of taking a higher price contract to his boss, Angela.
This is perhaps the most common hidden objection in B2B sales. The buyer is sold, but they don't know how to sell it internally. They are afraid of looking foolish to their boss. So the seller has to step in and build a bridge to a happy boss. They have to do the math for Jim so Jim can take that math to Angela.
So how does the seller minimize this fear of the higher price?
They go straight back to the painful data uncovered in discovery. The seller says, Jim, when we were discussing the severe service issues you were having with your current vendor, you told me that downtime was costing you around $1,100 a month in lost wages and another $4,200 a month in missed sales opportunities.
Right. Okay, so Jim agrees.
Right, Jim agrees. The seller then points out that the new plan eliminates this downtime, improving retention and making Jim's team much more productive, which is exactly the metric Angela, the boss, cares about.
Okay, so the seller is aligning the product with the boss's goals, the bridge to the happy boss. But how do they handle the actual price difference?
They slow down and lay out the hard, undeniable numbers. The seller says, let's look at the reality, Jim. Right now, by doing nothing, you are losing over $63,000 a year by sticking with your current vendor.
Hold on, let me pause the role play. Let's break down that math so the listener can track it. Where did $63,000 come from? We mentioned $1,100 a month in wages and $4,200 in missed sales.
Exactly. Add those together. That's $5,300 a month in pure losses due to the bad vendor. Multiply that by 12 months, and you get $63,600 a year bleeding out of the company.
Wow. Okay, so even if our new product costs more on a monthly basis, we are stopping a massive $60,000 leak.
Precisely. And that is exactly how the seller frames it to Jim. Jim, yes, our monthly rate is higher than what you pay now. However, once we eliminate those lost sales and payroll costs, you actually net a savings of almost $35,000 a year. Even when we factor in the one-time transition cost of switching to us, you deliver a positive ROI of $25,000 to Angela in the very first year.
That is brilliant. You are equipping Jim with the exact mathematical argument he needs to walk into Angela's office and look like an absolute hero. You minimize the fear of the higher monthly price by zooming out and maximizing the total annual savings. You turned a cost into a profit.
But again, hear this clearly. You can only do that if you ask the right questions during discovery. If the salesperson had been lazy and didn't dig into exactly how much the downtime was costing in wages and sales, they would have zero leverage to minimize the price objection at the end. They would have just had to offer a discount.
Discovery is the fuel that powers the turnaround. Which brings us to the final step of the 5-step framework. We've minimized the objection. Step 5, ask fallback.
Once you have successfully minimized the objection, you must confidently ask for the commitment again. You ask for the signature. But, crucially, you must have fallback positions prepared in advance.
Multiple paths up the mountain are better than one.
Right. Because sometimes, despite your best efforts, the primary ask is just too big a leap for them on that day. If you ask for the massive 3-year enterprise-wide contract and they still balk, you don't just pack up your briefcase, say, call me when you're ready, and leave.
You fall back.
Yes.
Yep.
You reduce the friction. You ask for a pilot program in just one department, or a smaller initial bulk purchase, or a paid trial period. You must leave that meeting with something that advances the deal and keeps the momentum alive. You should be mapping out these worst-case scenarios and fallback positions before you ever walk into the room.
Okay, so what does this all mean? We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We started with Richard making 71 desperate voicemails, and we've ended up deep in the neurochemistry and behavioral economics of a high-stakes closing conversation.
If we pull back from all the tactics and look at the actual soul of this chapter, the core insight is this. Objections are not a monolithic, terrifying wall of rejection that just suddenly appears out of nowhere at the end of a pitch.
Right.
They are contextual roadblocks. They are mapped to very specific stages of human interaction and psychology. Prospecting RBOs are a reflex reaction to an interruption. Early meeting red herrings are a distraction driven by ego. Micro-commitment stalls are driven by a lack of perceived value. And final buying commitments are driven by the fear of the unknown.
You can't use a hammer for every screw. You have to diagnose the type of resistance before you can apply the framework.
Exactly. But there is one ultimate underlying force that dictates your success or failure across all four of these objections, regardless of which framework you use. And that is the concept of emotional contagion.
Emotional contagion. Let's unpack that term before we wrap up.
Well, human beings are incredibly adept on a subconscious biological level at picking up on the emotions of the people around them. We are pack animals. If you walk into a negotiation and you are deeply insecure, if you are passive, if you are terrified of hearing the word no, and your adrenaline is spiking, you literally transfer that fear to the buyer. Your insecurity creates resistance where it might not have even existed. The buyer feels your anxiety. They don't consciously know why, but their brain tells them something is wrong, so they pull back.
So if I walk in expecting a fight, I'm going to get a fight. But the reverse must also be true, right?
Absolutely. If you internalize these agile frameworks, if you know how to pause, relate, ask open-ended questions, and maintain a relaxed, non-complimentary posture, you remain calm. Your neocortex stays engaged. You remain empathetic and quietly confident.
And the buyer absorbs that emotion.
Yes. They mirror your confidence. Getting past no isn't about out-arguing the buyer with superior logic or a magical script.
Yeah.
It is about deep listening, managing your own disruptive biological emotions, and gently pulling the buyer toward a shared goal.
It is about changing the dynamic from a combative me versus you to a collaborative us versus the problem.
Probably.
We have spent this entire deep dive exploring the tactical side of the equation. We've given you the 4 frameworks, flipping the script on prospecting RBOs, putting red herrings in the parking lot to activate the dopamine loop, articulating the value trait for micro-commitments, and the 5-step relate, isolate, clarify, minimize, and ask method for those final buying commitments. But, as we've hinted at, there is a biological war happening inside your own head every single time you face resistance.
And that is exactly where we're heading next. Mastering the tactics is only half the battle. In our next deep dive, we are going to explore the actual neuroscience of resistance.
I cannot wait for that.
We are going to look at why the human brain processes the emotional pain of a sales rejection in the exact same biological way it processes physical injury, like a broken arm or a burn. And more importantly, we will explore how you can hack your own biology to master those disruptive emotions and become truly rejection-proof.
I think it's going to change the way a lot of us view our daily interactions. But until then, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Remember Richard staring at his phone after 5 months of grinding, finally hearing his prospect throw up a massive wall at the finish line.
Poor Richard.
The next time you are in that moment, when your own adrenaline spikes, when the silence stretches out across the boardroom and you feel that desperate, overwhelming urge to just start talking and give away the farm, pause. Take a breath. And ask yourself this: are they actually rejecting my product, or are they just reacting to the fear I walked into the room with? Have you ever delivered a flawless, completely logical pitch to a prospect, only to be met with a baffling, entirely irrational no?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is one of the most frustrating experiences in the world.
Right. I mean, think about it for a second. You have the data. The return on investment is crystal clear.
Absolutely. The math is right there.
Exactly. Your solution is objectively better than what they're currently using, and you lay it all out perfectly in this pristine slide deck. But then they just cross their arms, lean back, and hit you with an objection that makes absolutely no logical sense.
It's infuriating. But, biologically speaking, presenting undeniable data to an opposing view doesn't actually stimulate the logic center of the brain at all.
Wait, really? It doesn't?
No, not at all. It actually triggers the exact same fight or flight response as being chased by a predator.
That is wild to think about. And that biological reality is exactly what we are unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into some fascinating insights from Chapter 4 of Jeb Blount's book, Objections, specifically the chapter titled The Science of Resistance.
It's such a crucial chapter.
It really is. Today, we are looking at the biological and psychological drivers that cause buyers to become irrational and push back. You'll learn exactly why perfectly logical arguments fail and why understanding these cognitive biases is the ultimate cheat code for anyone in business or entrepreneurship.
Yeah, the mission of this deep dive is really to decode those hidden psychological forces. We want you to stop fighting your prospects' brains and start speaking to their underlying emotional needs.
Because the assumption that buyers make rational decisions based on self-interest is just completely false, isn't it?
Oh, completely false.
Okay.
I mean, it's a profound realization when you finally understand that human beings do not make decisions based on some rational calculation of self-interest.
Even though we really like to think we do.
Right.
We build entire economic models on the assumption that we do. But when faced with a buying commitment, which inherently means change, and risk, the human nervous system is fundamentally wired to resist.
So we spend all this time perfecting the undeniable logic of our arguments, and we completely ignore the biological reality of the deeply anxious person sitting across the table from us.
Exactly, which is why Blount makes this brilliant point that buyers do not go to objection school.
Right. They don't have a textbook of negotiation tactics they're pulling from.
No, not at all. The resistance originates entirely at the emotional level, not the logical level. It's an autonomic biological response to pressure.
I want to dig into that mechanism because if objections are fundamentally emotional, then trying to argue someone out of an objection is, well, it's a biological impossibility, right?
It really is. You cannot use pure logic to instantly override an emotional survival mechanism.
Yet when an entrepreneur or a salesperson encounters an objection, their immediate, untrained instinct is always to fight back with facts. Oh, always. They think, they just don't understand the features. Let me explain it again, maybe a little louder, and point to this graph.
Yeah. Let me show you the pie chart again. But doing that actually hurts the deal, doesn't it?
It kills the deal
Mm-hmm.
because the underlying mechanism there is something psychologists call reactance.
Reactance. Okay, what exactly is that?
So reactance is a highly defensive psychological and physiological response. When people feel that their freedom to choose is being threatened, or when they feel they're being pushed into a corner by someone trying to persuade them, they push back hard
So their emotional walls just go straight up.
immediately. The moment you start arguing with a prospect, even if you are politely saying, well, actually, our data shows, you are triggering that reactance.
Wow. Even if you're polite about it.
Especially if you're polite but correcting them. You are signaling to their brain that you are a threat to their autonomy.
It's almost like an invisible force field that goes up the second they sense you're trying to win the argument.
That force field is the sympathetic nervous system kicking into gear. I mean, human beings despise being told they are wrong because it threatens their status.
Right, and in a tribal sense, losing status meant isolation and death.
Exactly. So when you correct a buyer, you aren't just correcting a spreadsheet. To their primitive brain, you are literally threatening their survival.
So the deal is effectively dead at that point because you're no longer a collaborator, you're an adversary.
Spot on. You're the enemy now.
But wait, I want to explore the boundaries of this. Let's say a buyer is factually incorrect about my product's capabilities.
Okay.
Let's say they tell me, your software doesn't integrate with our legacy accounting system, and I know for an absolute fact that it does. I have a case study proving it.
Right. The data's on your side.
Yeah. If I know they are factually wrong, why does stating the factual truth create friction? Shouldn't the hard data just relieve their anxiety?
You would think so, but it creates friction because of how the human brain processes contradictory information.
What do you mean?
Well, if you immediately contradict them, their brain doesn't actually process the integration capabilities of your software. The brain requires significant metabolic energy to process new logic,
Okay, that makes sense.
but it requires almost zero energy to feel insulted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So their brain processes the fact that you just challenged their professional competency. You have to remember that in a corporate setting, people are fiercely protective of their ego and their perceived expertise.
So if I jump in with, actually, you're wrong, it does integrate, I've basically just embarrassed them in front of their team.
Exactly. You've made them feel small.
I'm just picturing trying to use like a beautifully color-coded Excel spreadsheet to calm down a screaming toddler in the middle of a grocery store.
That is the perfect analogy.
I mean, the logic of the spreadsheet means absolutely nothing to the emotion of the moment. The toddler doesn't care about your pivot table. They are just overwhelmed.
Right. And the toddler doesn't care because their prefrontal cortex, the logical part of the brain, is effectively offline.
And the executive in the boardroom is no different when reactance is triggered.
No different at all. The spreadsheet is useless until the person feels safe and heard.
This applies way beyond just business, doesn't it?
Oh, everywhere. Imagine negotiating with a partner about finances or pitching a radical new idea to a skeptical boss.
Yeah, when we sense someone is trying to force a conclusion on us, we dig our heels in.
Not because we believe our logic is flawless, but because we are defending our right to choose.
So, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of the listener right now, the practical takeaway here is completely shutting down your argument reflex.
Completely. Turn it off.
When you hear an objection, you must never try to prove a prospect wrong in that moment. Instead, you have to minimize the emotional size of their concern before you introduce any logic whatsoever.
Yes. You must validate the friction.
How do you do that without agreeing that your product is bad?
Well, you pause. You acknowledge their concern without judging it. You might say something like, integration with legacy systems is traditionally a massive headache, so I completely understand why that's a primary concern for you.
Oh, I see. Notice what happened there. You didn't agree that your software fails to integrate. You just validated their fear of integration.
Exactly. Once that emotional temperature drops, the threat response fades. And then, and only then, can the prefrontal cortex come back online to actually engage with your facts.
Okay, so if we can't argue with them, and their defenses are naturally high, how do we even get their attention in the first place?
That is the big question.
Because it seems like by the time they were throwing up emotional walls, we've already lost control of the interaction. So how do we snap them out of that autopilot before they even have a chance to get defensive?
To answer that, we have to look at the sheer processing power of the human brain. And more importantly, how it actively filters information to save calories.
Save calories, like literal energy. Literal energy. The brain consumes about 20% of the body's energy, despite being just a tiny fraction of its weight.
That is a massive energy drain.
Right. So to survive, it evolved a mechanism to tune out predictable patterns.
What you mean?
Well, every single day, modern buyers are bombarded with thousands of cold calls, generic emails, identical pitch decks. If our brains consciously analyzed every single one of those data points, we would physically exhaust ourselves.
It's the neurological equivalent of driving all the way home from work and suddenly realizing you don't remember the last 5 miles.
Highway hypnosis. Exactly. Your brain recognized the route was perfectly safe and utterly predictable, so it shifted into a low-energy autopilot mode.
So how do we break that autopilot in a business setting?
Well, in the brain, the amygdala acts as the primary radar system. It's the emotional center, and it's constantly scanning the environment for threats, but also for novelty.
It loves bright, shiny new things.
Yes. It actively ignores the mundane and the expected. What forces the amygdala to pay attention, what makes it allocate precious glucose to conscious thought, are disruptions to the pattern.
This makes me think of banner blindness on websites.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah, years ago, a flashing banner ad at the top of a web page would get a massive click-through rate. But over time, our brains learned where the ads were placed, top rail, right rail, and we literally stopped rendering them on the screen. Our eyes track right past them.
We've seen the pattern so many times that the brain deletes it from our conscious awareness.
Which is exactly what is happening in a standard corporate meeting, right?
100%. If you walk into a boardroom and pull up a slide deck that starts with a timeline of your company's history since 1985, followed by a slide with logos of all the brands you work with,
You are the banner ad.
you're the banner ad. The stakeholders in that room have mentally checked out before you even get to slide 2. Their amygdalas have categorized you as standard sales pitch and put you straight into the mental spam folder.
So we need to do what Blount calls pattern painting.
Exactly, pattern painting.
We have to take these boring, predictable sales patterns and paint them with bright colors to flip the buyer script.
Right, you pull the stakeholders toward you by being completely unexpected.
But I want to figure out what that actually looks like in practice. Because, I can't just walk into a Fortune 500 boardroom and start doing jumping jacks to disrupt their pattern.
You could, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Right. So how exactly do we paint with bright colors in a standard corporate meeting without looking foolish?
It's about subverting their deepest expectations of the interaction. Think about it. The brain expects a salesperson to be overly agreeable, to hide flaws, and to immediately push for a close.
So you do the exact opposite.
Precisely. What if, instead of opening a meeting with that standard company history slide, you opened by acknowledging a painful universal truth about their industry that no one else is willing to say out loud?
Oh, that would definitely wake them up.
Or Better yet, what if you started by willingly admitting a flaw in your own product?
Admitting a flaw right up front, that feels incredibly risky.
It feels risky to the salesperson, sure, but to the buyer's brain, it is absolute fireworks.
How so?
Imagine sitting down and saying, before we begin, I want to be perfectly clear. Our software is likely going to be the most expensive option you look at this quarter. And to be frank, our implementation process is notoriously demanding on your IT team.
Wow.
But here is why our current clients insist that friction is actually their biggest competitive advantage.
Oh, I see it. The buyer's amygdala lights up immediately. They are completely shocked.
Exactly. Because salespeople are supposed to hide their flaws and discount their prices.
By leading with the hard, uncomfortable truth, you completely disarm their defense mechanisms. You've painted the boring pattern with a bright neon color, and now they are actively leaning in.
They're listening to every single word you say because you have broken the trance of the expected.
The neurological impact of unexpected honesty is profound. It forces the brain to allocate energy to the prefrontal cortex to process this anomaly.
And you aren't just getting their attention. You are establishing instantaneous trust because you signaled that you aren't playing the usual game.
So the practical takeaway for the listener here is to ruthlessly audit your own approach.
Yes. Look at how you pitch, how you structure your emails, how you kick off a meeting.
Identify the standard, mind-numbing pattern of your specific industry. What does every single one of your competitors do? And intentionally design an approach that does the exact opposite.
If everyone sends a generic follow-up email, you send a highly personalized 30-second video breakdown.
If everyone leads with a list of features, you lead with a jarring question about their biggest operational failure. You have to break the trance.
But here's where the science gets really insidious.
Uh-oh. What do you mean?
Let's say you do everything right. You don't argue with them, so their reactance is low. You paint the pattern, so their amygdala is engaged, and you have their full attention.
Right. They're looking right at you, absorbing your brilliant disruptive pitch.
You still have a massive uphill battle, because once you have their attention, you are going head-to-head with their brain's deepest, most primal urge, the desire to do absolutely nothing.
Oh, man. Which brings us to the paralyzing force of the status quo bias.
Yes, the status quo bias.
Blount states plainly that humans do not like change, and we will actively expend energy to avoid it. We live by the axiom, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Even when the thing in question is, in fact, incredibly broken.
Right. So why do we do that?
To understand this, we really have to look back at evolutionary psychology. The status quo bias is deeply linked to the safety bias.
Okay, take me back to the savannah.
Right, on the savannah, the unknown was a death sentence. If our ancestors found a food source that was just okay, but it was safe from predators, they stayed there.
Because exploring a new, potentially better food source carried the risk of being eaten.
Exactly. Surviving meant sticking to what was known, even if it was suboptimal.
So that evolutionary wiring is still driving our corporate decision-making today.
100%. The pain of changing systems or processes feels inherently, biologically riskier than the pain of staying the same.
So a buyer will look at your shiny new solution, logically agree that it's vastly superior, but still choose to do nothing because the sheer cognitive effort of navigating the unknown triggers that ancient fear response.
Yes, and it is compounded by something even heavier than the fear of the unknown.
What's heavier than that?
The psychological anchor of what they have already done. We are talking about the sunk cost fallacy.
Oh, the sunk cost fallacy. That is a big one.
It's huge. Most of us walk around with this delusion that we make decisions based on a desired future state. We think, I want my team to be more efficient, therefore I will buy this new tool.
But that's not what's actually happening.
Not at all. The reality is that our decisions are disproportionately influenced by what we have already invested in our current state.
I want to paint a picture of this because I've seen it ruin businesses. Let's imagine a fictional VP of operations. We'll call him Dave.
Okay, Dave.
5 years ago, Dave championed a massive enterprise-wide software implementation. He fought for the budget, he put his reputation on the line, and the company spent $2 million on it.
A massive investment.
Huge. But today, the software is an absolute nightmare. The employees are miserable, it crashes daily, and it's costing the company money and lost productivity.
It's objectively a disaster.
Right. But every time someone suggests replacing it, Dave aggressively shuts the conversation down and insists they just need more training.
Poor Dave.
Dave is trapped in the sunk cost fallacy.
He is. Dave is terrified of the cortisol spike that comes with admitting failure.
Because if Dave agrees to buy your new superior software, he isn't just making a purchasing decision.
No, he has to walk into his CEO's office and effectively say, I made a $2 million mistake 5 years ago. All that money, all that time, and all the political capital I spent was a total waste.
And now I need you to trust me with more money to fix it.
Exactly. And the human ego, particularly in a high-stakes corporate environment, simply cannot tolerate that level of vulnerability and perceived loss of status.
So Dave clings to the broken system. He doubles down on a bad investment to protect his ego from the pain of the sunk cost.
It's self-preservation.
So if I'm the entrepreneur trying to sell this new software to Dave, how do I possibly overcome that? Because if I go in there and aggressively pitch how amazing and modern my new system is, I am inadvertently shining a massive spotlight on how terrible his past decision was.
Yes, you are.
By proving my product is great, I am basically proving that Dave is an idiot.
Which triggers reactance, and we're right back to where we started.
Right. So what do we do?
This is why you must completely change how you frame your pitch. You have to stop pitching the glowing utopian future state and start addressing the emotional weight of their past investments.
You have to give Dave an emotional out.
You do.
But wait, so I have to validate Dave's terrible software choice? I have to somehow make him the hero of the past?
Well, you don't validate the current dysfunction, but you validate the original intent and the journey.
How does that sound in a meeting?
You sit down with Dave and you say, look, the infrastructure you put in place 5 years ago was exactly what this company needed to scale from 10 million to 50 million in revenue.
Okay, validating the task.
It was a massive undertaking, and it provided the foundational data architecture that got you to where you are today. It did its job.
Wow.
But now, to scale from 50 million to 200 million, we need to evolve that infrastructure.
That is brilliant. By framing the new solution as an evolution rather than a replacement, you remove the sting of failure.
Exactly. You aren't rendering Dave's past efforts useless. You are building upon the foundation he laid.
He doesn't have to tell the CEO he made a mistake. He gets to tell the CEO that his Phase 1 plan was a success, and it's time for Phase 2.
You allow him to save face while simultaneously leading him away from the status quo.
It is entirely about lowering the emotional cost of change. But let's say you do this perfectly. You validate Dave. He feels good about his past, and he is finally open to the future.
Okay, Dave is ready.
The trap that most professionals fall into at this exact moment is trying to prove how robust their new solution is by overwhelming the buyer with information.
Which leads us directly into the trap of ambiguity bias and the less is better effect.
Because if Dave is already naturally terrified of change, and he is barely willing to let go of his sunk costs, the absolute worst thing we could do is dump a massive 70-page proposal on his desk, right?
It would be disastrous. I mean, ambiguity bias is a cognitive bias, where decision-making is heavily affected by a lack of information, or conversely, by too much complex, ambiguous information.
So giving them too much actually hurts.
Tremendously. When human beings are faced with too many variables, too much complexity, or a lack of clear, linear outcomes, the prefrontal cortex becomes overloaded. It experiences cognitive strain.
And what happens then?
The brain's default defense mechanism against cognitive strain is to freeze.
It's the paradox of choice on steroids.
Exactly. As a seller, you think giving them 42 distinct reasons to buy makes your case mathematically stronger. You think you are building an undeniable mountain of value.
But neurologically, you are actually paralyzing them. A confused mind always defaults to no.
Or, even worse, they give you the dreaded, this is super interesting, let me think about it and get back to you.
Which is just a slow, agonizing death for a deal.
It really is. Let's use a tangible analogy to understand how complexity destroys confidence. Think about the psychological difference between dining at a massive all-night diner versus dining at an exclusive Michelin star restaurant.
Oh, the menus.
Yes, the menus.
When you sit down at the diner, they hand you a 10-page laminated book with 300 items. They have pancakes, they have sushi, they have meatloaf.
It's exhausting.
You look at this overwhelming wall of options, and your immediate subconscious thought is, there is absolutely no way the kitchen can do all 300 of these things well. The complexity actually degrades your trust in their competence. You feel anxious just trying to order.
Now, compare that to the Michelin star experience. You sit down, and the menu is a single piece of high-quality paper. There are exactly 3 options for the main course.
It is clean, it is incredibly simple, and it projects ultimate authority.
The psychological subtext is, we know exactly what we are doing, We are the experts, and you are in good hands. Less is always better. It reduces cognitive load and projects supreme confidence.
But I want to challenge this from the perspective of someone selling a highly technical product.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's say I'm selling enterprise cybersecurity software. It is inherently complex. It involves deep technical integrations, compliance protocols, and intricate data mapping.
Right.
Don't I need to show them all the data, the charts, and the technical specs to prove that my solution is thorough? Won't a simple 3-bullet-point proposal make me look unprofessional, like I don't grasp the depth of their problem?
That's a very common fear. But this is where salespeople project their own insecurities onto the buyer.
What do you mean?
The salesperson feels anxious about asking for a massive sum of money, so they overcompensate by throwing every single feature, every line of code, and every complex chart into the deck to justify the price to themselves.
Oh, wow. So we're doing it for us, not for them.
Exactly. You are confusing the buyer's need for safety with a need for technical granularities.
So how do we structure a complex proposal that projects that Michelin star confidence without triggering ambiguity bias?
Blown has mentioned something called the bridging framework.
The bridging framework. Break that down for me.
The bridging framework is a psychological tool designed to strip away the noise and present a clear, undeniable path forward. It consists of 3 extremely focused steps.
Okay, step 1.
First, you articulate their current state. You describe their specific pain points so accurately that they feel completely understood.
Validation.
Right. Second, you present the recommendation. This is your solution, but kept clean and conceptual. You don't list 50 features. You focus on the 3 to 5 key priorities that actually matter to them.
Keep it to the Michelin star menu.
Yes. And third, you paint the future state. You clearly articulate the positive, measurable business outcomes they will achieve, supported by relevant case studies.
Current state, recommendation, future state.
Exactly. You are building a simple, sturdy bridge from their pain to their salvation.
So the practical application for our listeners is to ruthlessly edit your pitches.
Ruthlessly.
Go through your next proposal and banish every complex data point, every dense architectural chart, and every exhaustive feature list to the appendix.
Just put it in the back.
Yeah. If the highly technical people in the room want to dig into the weeds, the appendix is there to provide that safety. But the core presentation must focus only on the bridge.
You have to provide the clarity and the psychological safety their brain is desperately craving.
Because by lowering their cognitive load, you actually make it physiologically easier for them to say yes, right? Because they finally understand exactly what they're agreeing to.
That's exactly right.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap the psychological gauntlet we've run so far.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. We've minimized their emotional reactance by refusing to argue with them. We've disrupted their autonomic filtering by painting the pattern with unexpected honesty. We've bypassed the sunk cost fallacy by framing our pitch as an evolution of their past choices. And we've prevented ambiguity bias by keeping the proposal Michelin star simple.
We have essentially paved a beautifully smooth psychological road.
But we still have to get them to cross the finish line.
Yes, the hardest part.
How do we prevent that last-minute panic? How do we lock them in and make it psychologically painful for them to back out?
This is where we bring in the heavy hitters of cognitive influence. We're talking about availability heuristics and cognitive dissonance.
Okay, these sound intense. Let's start with availability heuristics.
So the concept here is that human beings naturally place heavier reliance on information that is easiest to recall from memory.
Because it's available.
Right. And neurologically, things become easier to recall the more frequently we are exposed to them. It's about neuroplasticity.
So the brain actually changes.
Literally. The more a specific neural pathway fires, the thicker the myelin sheath around it becomes, and the faster that signal travels.
So frequent positive information actually structurally changes the brain to make that information highly available. Blount calls this the illusory truth effect.
The illusory truth effect dictates that the more often we hear a specific message, the more likely we are to believe it is inherently true, simply because it feels familiar.
And familiarity equates to safety in the brain.
Exactly. If a professional stays in constant, value-driven contact with a buyer, reinforcing the same 3 core simple messages over and over again, those messages become highly available in the buyer's memory architecture.
So when it comes time to make the final terrifying decision, the brain reaches for what is most accessible.
Yes. If your positive, simple framing is the most neurologically accessible thought, it actively neutralizes the sudden, fear-based objections that might pop up.
But the real magic trick, The ultimate strategy for closing a deal relies on cognitive dissonance.
Oh, it is incredibly powerful.
We've all heard the term, but in this context, it's about using the buyer's own psychology to guide them across the finish line.
Right, because cognitive dissonance isn't just a mild discomfort. It is a literal physiological pain registered in the anterior cingulate cortex of the brain when our beliefs contradict our actions.
We despise feeling like hypocrites. Our brains demand internal consistency.
Which means if you wait until the very end of a presentation to ask for a massive commitment, you are forcing the buyer to make a massive leap over a canyon, and their brain will likely refuse.
Too much friction all at once.
Way too much. But if you can collect a pocket full of yeses micro-commitments throughout the entire discovery and sales process, you create immense psychological leverage.
I love this concept of micro-commitments. It's like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs deep into a forest.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
If you get someone to follow you one breadcrumb at a time, by the time they get to the center of the forest, turning around and walking all the way back out means admitting they were wrong to follow the very first breadcrumb.
And their brain will fight to avoid that realization.
Exactly. You cannot argue a buyer out of the status quo with logic at the very end of a deal. But you can use their own prior agreements against their sudden resistance.
Because if you get small yeses along the way, you force their brain to align their final decision with their past actions. To back out now would trigger the acute pain of cognitive dissonance.
Walk me through a highly specific scenario of what collecting these breadcrumbs looks like in a complex B2B sales conversation. How do we actually build this pocket full of yeses without sounding manipulative?
You do it by asking clarifying questions that require agreement on fundamental truths early and often.
Give me an example.
Let's say you are on a discovery call on day one. You ask the prospect, looking at these numbers, would you agree that your current manual reporting process is costing your team at least 10 hours a week?
And the buyer nods and says, yes, absolutely.
Right. You pocket that yes. Then 2 weeks later, during a software demo, you show them a specific feature and ask, do you agree that this automated dashboard would directly recover those 10 hours for your team?
And the buyer says, yes, it would.
You pocket that yes. You are establishing a documented pattern of agreement based on their own logic.
So then, a month later, you are at the final executive pitch, you ask for the signature, and suddenly the buyer gets cold feet.
The amygdala flares up.
The status quo bias kicks in, and they say, you know what, the price is just too high right now. I think we are just going to stick with our manual process for another year.
Now, if I'm an untrained salesperson, I immediately start arguing the ROI and trying to justify the price, which triggers their reactance.
Right, you get defensive.
But because you understand the science of resistance, you don't argue the price at all. You bring out the breadcrumbs. You use their own internal need for consistency to guide them.
You say something like, I completely understand that this is a significant financial investment and price is always a vital concern. Validate it.
Yes, validate first.
But I'm a little confused. During our very first call, you explicitly mentioned that the manual process is draining 10 hours a week from your team, which you agreed was unsustainable.
Bring up breadcrumb number 1.
And during the demo, you agreed that this specific automation would solve that exact problem. Has something fundamentally changed regarding your team's urgent need to recover those hours?
That is the checkmate.
It really is, isn't it?
Because to say no, at this point, the buyer has to contradict their own stated beliefs. They have to look you in the eye and say, actually, I was lying before. We don't care about the 10 hours. Or they have to admit they're making an irrational decision now.
It triggers intense cognitive dissonance.
The brain, seeking to resolve that uncomfortable internal conflict and maintain its self-image as a rational, consistent actor, will almost always choose to move forward with the purchase.
Because you didn't force them. You simply held up a mirror to their own commitments.
Exactly.
It's incredibly powerful, and it applies far beyond boardroom sales. Think about everyday persuasion.
Oh, absolutely.
If you were trying to convince a friend to start going to the gym with you, you don't just spring a $100 a month membership contract on them out of nowhere. You start small.
Right. You ask, do you agree that we both feel sluggish lately and need to get more active? Yes.
Do you think having a workout partner would hold us accountable so we don't quit? Yes.
By the time you finally say, I found a gym right between our houses, let's sign up, they find it deeply uncomfortable to say no, because they have already intellectually committed to the underlying premise of the entire journey.
The lesson here is that persuasion is not a single heavy hammer blow at the end of a presentation. It is a subtle, continuous guiding process.
You make the final yes. Not a terrifying leap into the unknown, but simply the next logical, unavoidable step on a path they've already agreed they want to walk.
Okay, let's pull all of these complex threads together into a single cohesive synthesis. We've covered a massive amount of psychological and neurological ground today.
We really have.
The overarching truth of this chapter, the absolute soul of what Jeb Blount is teaching here, is that when a buyer resists, it is almost never about you, your specific product, or your price.
It is entirely biological. It is an autonomic emotional reaction to the perceived threat of change, the fatigue of ambiguity, and the overwhelming complexity of the unknown.
Which means mastering sales or leadership or any form of high-stakes persuasion requires a fundamental shift in how you view human communication.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
You have to stop selling to the logical prefrontal cortex, which is heavily guarded behind a fortress of cognitive biases. Instead, you have to become a guide for the emotional brain.
You validate and relate instead of arguing.
You disrupt their autonomic filtering with unexpected honesty.
You honor their sunk costs to protect their ego.
You ruthlessly simplify your choices to lower their cognitive load.
And you leverage their own desire for consistency to pull them across the finish line.
You cease being an adversary trying to conquer their logic, and you become a facilitator, helping them navigate their own biological resistance.
That's beautifully said.
And that leads me to a final, slightly uncomfortable thought for you, the listener, to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive.
Okay, lay it on them.
We've spent the last hour meticulously analyzing how buyers suffer from the sunk cost fallacy, the status quo bias, and ambiguity bias. We've talked about how their amygdalas filter out the noise and how they get paralyzed by complexity.
Right.
But here is the real question you need to ask yourself today. Where are these exact same cognitive biases actively sabotaging your own entrepreneurial decisions right now?
Oh, man. That is the ultimate mirror we all have to look into. Because none of us are immune to our own biology.
Think about it. What failing marketing campaign or broken operational process are you stubbornly clinging to right now simply because you've already spent thousands of dollars on it?
That's your ego trapped in the sunk cost fallacy.
What necessary, aggressive pivot in your business model are you actively avoiding because the familiar dysfunction of the status quo just feels a little bit safer? We are all human, and our brains are all wired for survival, not for optimal business growth.
Recognizing these biological realities in your prospects is the first step to mastering persuasion. But conquering these biases in your own mind is where the real exponential growth actually happens.
Now that we know exactly why buyers biologically resist and how to guide them through it, how do we deal with the intense, visceral, emotional toll it takes on us when they still inevitably say no?
Because it does hurt.
It really does. Rejection isn't just disappointing. Neurologically, it registers as physical pain. Join us on the next deep dive as we explore the brutal science behind the hurt of rejection and how to bulletproof your own mindset.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.